Well, it's a work session.
Oh, right. Right. We're starting.
They're usually a little less attended.
Yeah. That makes sense. I just feel like Roger is always 12 minutes.
Oh. Super windy up here.
It's been windy down here today too.
Mm.
Yeah, we played some tennis this morning and it was like, oh my god, it's really windy.
Yeah, you have tennis courts right across the street.
Yeah, it's
We
really...
played at those, but they're always windy, so we don't play there anymore.
Oh, really?
I tried a couple times, but morning's probably much better than the afternoon.
Yeah.
You on the pickleball train yet? Okay,
Yeah.
if you ever want to play, let me know. I play tennis too, but not probably as well as you.
I'm not good at tennis. At least we only started like when the beginning of COVID. And I have fun, but I am not very good.
Did you make me co-host already or no?
I did. You should be, I think. Yeah. Also, I don't know if you can hear those dings, but I put those on. Hi, Sheridan. Just because it helps me keep track of people coming in and out. So I'm sorry if it annoys you.
No, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Sheridan, are you in Alta? Hi, Roger.
Yes, at the Rustler. I'm in a secret room.
A secret room.
Just
Why is
that's
it?
Sorry.
How does it get the name secret room?
Oh, it's named after Secret Lake.
Oh,
That whole wing.
Okay, got it. Got it.
But it's fun to think of it being like secret rooms.
Yes. Oh, I see the gala got moved another week.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
I didn't see it either, but I figured it was coming.
Yeah, it was in the last hour or so. It was a message from Tara.
Is it next Friday then?
Yes.
Yes, 9 days.
That's what, the 21st?
Yeah. Yes, 21st. And you're gonna get your money back if you want, or you can.
Oh yeah, they've got a wait list that's quite long.
Who else are we expecting? Craig, I know. Anyone else?
John Burns on the budget committee and Elise is on the budget committee.
Okay, got it.
Hey, Jen, can I ask a quick question? I don't know if this needs to be recorded or not, but about the committee meeting or committee notes. It's just a dog license question. I thought, are the Class C dog licenses the commuting dog licenses? Yeah, I thought so I was a little confused because I thought we were grandfathering those. So basically, if a dog dies in that class, there is no reissue of a tag, even within a 6-month period.
There's nothing in the ordinance that says that.
Yeah, I clearly remember that was our intention with that class, to basically grandfather that class out of existence.
I remember
guess-
the discussion, but I don't remember a decision that was written into the ordinance to make that happen ever.
Okay, I guess I'll bring that up in the general
It
meeting.
kind of comes up now when we do these votes, which, this council decided to go in line with that, but there could be a decision in the future, right, that could not agree with that. So we'd have to develop some language and change the ordinance.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, John Byrne is still in Alaska. But he's 2 hours behind. It's 11 o'clock there. Shouldn't be too bad. So let's wait a couple more minutes for him to join.
And I resent him the link and he just asked me for it again, and I'll resend it again.
Okay. Craig, are you or your neighbors suffering any structural damage?
So far, no. We've been make sure am I off mute? Yeah. So far, no. We had a couple of avalanches that grazed the house, and sort of broke around it, but nothing. This was before the snow got so heavy now, like it is now, and so we've been pretty fortunate.
Yeah, good. Anything at Rustler, Sheridan, in terms of structural damage that you're aware of? You're muted.
Can we back channel that, Mayor?
Anything at the Rustler that in the way of structural damage that you're aware of?
Yes.
Oh,
We have some leaking issues happening. We have some plumbing issues happening currently. Nothing too catastrophic.
No. Yeah, I'm a lot more worried about the flooding damage that I'm anticipating than I am about the avalanches.
well, as the snow recedes, we've discovered that it made quite a it's severely damaged the railing on our deck and some of the deck, so didn't even know it until snow backed off enough. Let's see, we got JB here yet?
No, just
We're working on
I'm
it.
trying to work with him too, Molly. I think it has, I remember this from last meeting.
I just resent him an email, just to reply to his email with the link for him, so it should
Hey,
work.
brother. Uh-huh.
So how are conditions in the? Oh, there we go. Okay, good. He is materialized.
Morning, everybody.
Harry Potter style. Okay, well, let's begin. I presume, Jen, you're the primary presenter, or is Craig?
Craig is gonna be today.
Okay, good.
Do you want
Take it
to
away,
call
Craig.
the meeting to order and all that?
Oh, yes. I hereby call the Budget Committee meeting of April 12th, 2023 to order. We're holding this an electronic meeting without an accurate location pursuant to my determination of earlier this month. Okay, proceed.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen if I can. Can I do that? Yep. And then I'm going to okay, so let me start out just sort of with a bit of a quick status update. I had hoped that we would be close to our final budget right now. We're not quite there. I think it's for good and understandable reasons. Both Chris and I had COVID. I think more importantly, we've had a power outage, and all the snow emergencies that we've had over the last couple of weeks. The good news, of course, is that we've got plenty of time to finalize our budget. I do expect that by the next Town of Alta meeting, we'll be ready to review what I hope is the final budget proposal. And that still gives us one more month before we have to sign off at the end of June. So we got plenty of time left, just a little behind sort of my mental time frame. Today, what we're going to focus on is, if you remember, what I suggested in September is that we divide the budgeting process into three major planks. The first one is the personnel budget. The second one is the outsourced contract budgets, and then the third one is the project stuff. I would say that hopefully by the end of this meeting, we'll be done more or less with the first two. The personnel and the outsourced contract stuff was pretty easy because it was more or less unchanged from last year. But the project stuff, we still need to have another project committee meeting, which we'll do before the next Town of Alta meeting, and then we'll present the proposed project budget at that meeting. So today, what we're going to do is concentrate on all the personnel work that has been done. And if you remember, what we did was I think it was November, we commissioned a person named Mike Swallow. He's out of Utah. He provides what most people call benchmarking service. So the ability to take your jobs and turn them into standard job descriptions and then benchmark them against the data that he's collected. He specializes in municipalities, so his database is highly relevant. And I'm not going to go through his entire methodology, but if you remember from December, he has a very robust methodology that starts with the job responsibility, the required job knowledge, the difficulty of the job, and the work environment. He then turns that into a job valuation rating, and then he uses that to compare to the market data. So today, I'm just going to give you a quick refresher on Mike's work, which I did most of already. I'm going to show you the recommendation that is the result of work between the end of November, between the middle of November and fairly recently. So it's fairly hot off the presses. I've got a recommendation on a transition capacity increase, and we'll get to that in the slides. And then I wanted to also just point to where we are in terms of projection of income and budget trends over the next couple of years to help give you comfort in making any needed decisions. So in December, Mike went through his entire methodology, which, as I said, is quite robust. I think this is the chart that summarizes it best. It basically says, and you can see sort of from the data points that are here, that we were more or less this is the minimum line. You can see that on the minimum of the range, that for the top jobs, we were actually fairly far below the minimum. Yeah. All right, why does that go? Further work commenced since that December meeting. In particular, Jen and Roger spent a lot of time going through line by lines. There were lots of adjustments to it. And the final recommendations were distributed in the packet that you already received. Here's the department breakout of the increases. You can see that the total increase that's being recommended is about $175,000. As expected, and as expected from that graph that showed that it was really just the top jobs that were out of line, almost all of the salary adjustments were concentrated in the top position. So of the $175,000 recommendation of the change, the top 4 positions comprise $140,000 of it. Specifically, you can see here, what I've done is compared the current salaries, which are here, to the midpoint annual salaries, which are here. And you can see that for the new town manager position that we're recruiting for, we elected to put in the midpoint for the budget. And for the other 3 positions, we've gotten them above the minimum line, but still below that midpoint, giving a fair amount of room for, you know, increases in the following years. And I think Roger last time, or maybe it was a meeting before, discussed his belief or his hope that John Gildner would continue on as a contractor for the town of Alta. That discussion has not yet been completed, so I don't have a budget expense for that yet at this point in time, but I'm just calling out that that is in addition to the $175,000 increase that we're recommending now. And once that contract is finalized, of course, you'll get sign off on the total amount. Let me just pause there first, because the next section is more on, you know, sort of the income sources and where we are from an affordability standpoint. $175,000 increase is a significant part of our, it's, I don't know, 8%, maybe 9% of our total annual revenue budget. But are there any questions on what I've been through so far?
What, with respect to the assumption about John working half-time this summer, at what rate is that number being calculated?
I didn't put that in this presentation, John, because I didn't, because that hasn't been negotiated, and I didn't want to prejudge on anything. I don't even know that Roger's had the conversation yet about whether it's halftime or more or the length of time. So I was just calling out that as part of this, I think that spending some money on that transition is really important. Having some overlap between John Gildner and whomever is the new town manager, I think is really important. And I think the extra expense, the one-time expense, will be well worth it, albeit I don't know how much money it is at this point in time.
And Jen, you have some money in the budget already for this. You're on mute, I think. Jen, you're muted.
Ken, you're muted.
I can answer.
Jen.
Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Jen. We missed all of that, I'm afraid.
Yes, I just realized that. Yes, I did put a very small token amount of money. I put $10,000 in the draft budget just to have a number. It's not to reflect any sort of information that I've really heard at this point. So please don't rely at all on that number.
So,
John, that's why I called out at the beginning of the meeting that I don't think we're not quite where I had hoped to be on the draft budget at this point in time. I would say there's a number of numbers in there that are going to be refined, but I don't see any problem with getting that done before the next meeting, giving us another full month after that to make decisions.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, one of the things that you know,
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Craig. I had some questions.
Sure.
Thanks. The initial methodology that was brought forward in December raised some questions for me with regard to comparables when it came to looking at towns. I think I'm in a tough position. I would love to, of course, pay my colleagues and friends who are esteemed greatly at the very top end of the scale. But I really questioned some of the assumptions made about comparable town size and where that would put us on this whole scale. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, look, there's no benchmarking exercise that I've ever been through that is perfect. And I think the real question that you need to ask yourself are two parts. A, is there systematic bias in the data that Mike used? Meaning, are the towns all significantly larger, and would that bias it in a manner that would, you know, sort of invalidate the response? The answer to that is I don't think so. I can't tell you that I've been through every line item of his database, but I did do, you know, a fairly extensive look at it, and it seemed to have a wide range of things. The second thing is, this is not a mechanical exercise. What we're trying to do is to make a data informed exercise. It doesn't mean that you are slaves to the data and that you're automatically, you know, taking whatever that is. I will tell you that the period between December, which was when we had the preliminary review and presentation of the data, and now that Jen and Roger in particular have gone through every line item, have discussed the particular positions, and this is their recommendation based upon a combination of that line by line review and the data, and not just the data, but also some of the methodology that Mike has.
But the way you define a sort of systemic bias is exactly what happened. I don't think there's any town that is as small as Alta that's comparable.
Well, that may or may not be true, but I do think that I might have a slightly different view on Alta. Meaning, I do not think that a lot of our labor pool is not going to come from Alta locals. So you actually have to look at the broader payroll, the broader geographic base from which we're going to recruit people. As you know, Sheridan, I would say with the price of housing in Alta going up, you know, significantly, and probably even significantly more than Salt Lake, that increasingly our people are going to be commuting. And so looking at that broader labor pool is, in my estimation, the right way to have the right size of the labor market from which to recruit.
I think there's two, just sort of dovetailing into Sheridan's comment. It certainly makes me feel better that we've been paying at the low end of the range, that based on population, for instance, or gross revenue, we're well below the median town in Swallow's survey. So, you know, before people get this idea that there's been some gross injustice, I kind of do think you need to consider adjusting for town size. And in some jobs, I think they have sort of more responsibility because they have less staff than they would have in other. So it really would take a lot of thought to really nail this down further. I think it's sort of beyond, I think if Mike was on the line, he'd say that's beyond the limits of his model. Also, inherently, probably this is as good a start as any, and I'm not disagreeing with these numbers, but the other thing that I think you got to remember that Swallow's work doesn't adjust for is, do we think the employee's doing a good job? And just sort of say, well, everybody should get the mean. I don't know. I mean, I think everybody, I mean, some people have just extraordinary levels of contribution. I'll just pick out the marshal, for instance, extraordinary contribution, and a ton of responsibility falls on his plate because he's got such a small staff. And, Mike's been doing the job for 30 years. So, there's nothing in Swallow's work that adjusts for sort of the opinion of our, the management's opinion of how good a job the employee is doing, and I think all our, honestly, all our employees have shown a ton of growth, and, there's no one that I would argue for less. But I do think that just to say, well, everybody should get paid the median of the big picture kind of ignores how hard the person works, if you will. And then also Sheridan's comments about, with a town of 200 people, should we really look to be, and if the median size town is, I don't have the study, so I don't know what the median size town is, but it's a number more than 200. 100,000 people is the average. I think we need to consider that.
Well, and you're right, John, if I can butt in here, it's like the friend of mine in Heber made fun of me. He goes, "You're the highest paid per capita town administrator in the state." Like, yeah, but I'm the lowest town administrator in the state, period. Amen. But then we talked, and he had like 5 employees under him helping him do stuff, not counting the clerks and the So you're right on 2 things. It's like, one, we don't have any backup. And Alta is not some backwater podunk town in the middle of rural Utah, which I wish it was. It'd be quite nice. So, it's difficult to compare.
I agree, John. I think that's exactly right. And I think there are probably just as many arguments that some people should be paid more, some people should be paid less than the median. And so I guess what I'm kind of bridling is the idea like the median's the magic number for everybody.
And John, just to reinforce though, if I, go back, the raises that we're recommending here are not taking everybody instantly to that median.
I didn't see this chart. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And so I think taking the town manager to the median makes a heck of a lot of sense, and probably is, well, let me ask it as a question, because I haven't been involved in any of the interviewing for the town manager. How many of the people that we're interviewing are basically locals versus living in Salt Lake or some other place from which they're going to commute? Because my guess is finding a town manager is going to require us to look beyond just sort of what I'll call the local employment environment.
Well, if you mean by local, if you mean residents in Alta, the answer is 0.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good chart. I found that chart, and it's a good chart. So basically, you're saying there is some adjustment for sort of the actual job itself and their actual responsibilities. And if what you're saying is we're going to try to get everybody at least within the range, because now we have some people that are just plain outliers.
Yep.
So let's get everybody at least in the range, and then within the range, we're going to have some differentiation. That seems like a sound approach to me.
And again, the reason I think to have the sort of the midpoint on the town manager is that's a new recruit. I think it's a really important recruit. Of course, Roger isn't going to pay him more money than he needs to when push comes to shove, but for budgeting purposes, I just think that's probably a prudent number to put in there. In the final analysis, as I said, none of this is mechanical. This all involves judgment. I think what we are trying to do, though, is to put some process around this and to collect some data so that at least we're making, reasonable data informed decisions. I think it's certainly, even if the data isn't perfect, I think it's better to have Roger looking at some data as he's making these decisions and recommendations than what we've done in the past. And I don't know that we need to do something this systematic every year, but I would recommend that, every few years that we do that, just to make sure that we're not placing ourselves at what I'll call undue turnover risk. All right, are there other questions or comments just on that first part? Great, I will move ahead. When I presented stuff in September of sort of what I call strategic directions in the budgeting process, one of the things that I emphasized was hopefully getting more proactive in our predictions. And that, of course, includes revenue predictions. And now I will repeat what John Gildner has said before, which is, yeah, but with a resort kind of town with the kind of income that we have, that is very difficult. I would say extraordinarily difficult, particularly this year. But I think it does help us to look at some of the trends and just look at where we are. And so I'm going to go through a few of those things. Here's data that I pulled from the 2016 through 22 audit reports. So I think the data is all consistent. And effectively what you can see here, well, actually, I think it's much easier to look at in the form of graphs. So revenue's been going up generally, even with the significant decline in property revenue last year, which we all know what that's a result of. Last year was a huge spike. Not 100% clear why that huge spike, although I think it has to do with some of the changing demographics and changing population growth that we're seeing down in Salt Lake City. One of the things that I will point out is that despite a steady accumulation of cash, our cash reserves have been going up every year. And that's sort of the blue line here. And then what I did was I also graphed the depreciation of the capital assets. And you say, well, why would you do that? In a large part, the obligation of the town is to provide infrastructural services. Those are all significant capital investments. What you see here is that in the time frame that our cash has been going up every year, we haven't even kept up with our depreciation timeline. And my expectation is we're going to be seeing more and more pressure on our infrastructure through day use. Why? Well, because if for no other reason, I don't know if the gondola is going to get built, but I'm pretty sure that I know that Utah did pass $150 million for transportation improvements, and I expect more money to be spent after that. All of those things, I think, will mean that we're going to have increasing numbers of skiers up here putting pressure on our infrastructure. Up until April 1, so here's a simple regression on the revenue trends of the last few years. There's two different methodologies here. One is a linear regression. The other one is more weighted towards the recent growth. And if you look in between those two lines of $2.25 to $2.5 million, I would have said up until April 1 that we'd be at least where we were last year, which is about 2.35. After April 1, I don't have any idea where we're going to be, but I do believe that the long-term trends here are pretty positive in terms of our revenue growth. For just to add some comfort to that, and make the numbers a little bit precise. Each year over the last 6 years, we've added not, just under $500,000 per year to our cash reserves. And this year in particular, I hope or expect we're in the process of, we've scheduled doing the truth and taxation revenue review this year. That might potentially increase our revenues by $400K. And in addition to that, I'll have Jen talk in a little bit about a potential municipal transient room tax increase that might generate an additional $200K. So the total increase in the salary budget that we're recommending at this time of $175K, I think that historically we've had plenty of extra cash to deal with this. And this year in particular, with some of these potential increases, I don't see it as an affordability problem. Let me just pause there. Anybody got any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, I buy most of that. This chart that you showed about the current assets versus depreciated.
Yeah.
Capital assets, just to make sure we're all on the same page. What that means is that our capital expenditure spending has been less than depreciation over time. And that's why our depreciated capital assets are actually falling, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. The answer to that chart is go ahead and do more capital spending. We should be doing capital spending that at least equals the amount of depreciation we're experiencing each year. And with that as a backdrop, I'd say, yeah, it appears that we can afford these increases when you look at the basic economics of taxes versus expenses. But I do think you need to consider that the number is probably not as large as the number on the screen, because we have this other problem where we should ramp up our capital spending to at least equal depreciation going forward. So, yeah, I think we're in a good position. Yeah, I think we can afford it, but I'm going to say it's this number less whatever additional monies you want to spend on CapEx each year.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, John. And what I was trying to say, and I think perhaps not as articulately as you, is that if we were in a steady state situation, meaning no expected increase of pressure on our infrastructure through increased number of visitors and skiers, then, sort of over time, you want to at least be keeping up with your depreciation. We haven't been doing that, and I'm suggesting that in a predictive sense that we're, because of some of the transportation issues that are going on and the investments that are going to be made in transportation, that we're going to have increasing pressure on our infrastructure, meaning that we need to do more than just keep up with depreciation. We're probably going to have to increase that. So you're 100% right.
I agree with what you just said there too. I think that we're actually going to have to spend more than just the depreciation amount going forward in order to maintain our level of service and guarantee our services.
And guys, can you throw out some rough numbers about what that would look like? Since I'm bouncing screens, forgive me.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Craig. I thought you were finished.
I would say, Sheridan, not yet. Remember I said that the big thing here will be the project budget. We're not ready to present the project budget, but we will be next meeting. And I think that's the appropriate time. I'm just agreeing with John that the increase in our salaries here is not the only source of the uses of cash going forward.
Right, but when you were showing that trend line and showing how we're not keeping up with our depreciation spending, don't you have a sense of the difference between the two?
Yeah, sure. And
what that number is?
It's not that much. You can just see it here sort of visually. you can see that if we were keeping up with our depreciation, we'd be spending maybe, well, probably now about another $200,000 per year.
Thank you.
Although I'm going to say it again, Sheridan, but I think we need to spend more than that. Doesn't need, that isn't all an expense next year. I think that's something that we have to wrestle with, over the next 5 years or so.
Copy that. Thank you.
All right, John, did I interrupt you? Were you going to say something?
No, I think we're all on the same page. And I think Sheridan, that's a great question and the right question to be asking.
Yep. Okay. So just to summarize what I've been through so far is I tried to give you a little bit of a refresher on Mike Swallow's work, and I will say that I'll reiterate what Sheridan said, which is there are absolute flaws in the data. I will tell you this is the third time I've been through this drill in various companies in the last 4 years. And I actually found Mike Swallow's work better than any of the other people that I've dealt with, despite the fact that some of the other people got paid considerably more than he did. The recommendation coming from the complete line-by-line review between Roger, Jen, myself, and Mike Swallow is for roughly $175,000. I will hope that Roger agrees with John Gildner on some sort of transition capacity increase, because I think that's highly desirable as we face the loss of knowledge of John Gildner, which in any case is going to be disruptive. I gave you a little bit. I will reiterate what John Gildner said. Prediction on income is quite difficult given the kind of environment that we're in as a resort town. That said, the trends look pretty good, and I think we're in pretty good shape, even with the comments that John Byrne made on the fact that we're going to be investing more in capital projects. I also I'll go to the next steps in the budget, because I'm going to want Jen to talk a little bit more about where we are. Where we are in terms of those two potential things, the transient room tax and the truth in taxation proposal. But before we get there, just remind you that we did divide the budget process into 3 phases. The changes in salary and personnel, which I think we just reviewed and hopefully completed. We've got the changes in the outsourced contracts, which was relatively trivial because most of the adjustments in those things were made mid-year, so that we're not looking at any significant increase in those as the budget. And then the changes in the project budgets, which both Sheridan and John Byrne are talking about, and where I think quite a bit of work is necessary over the next 5 years, will be reviewed at the next meeting. So we've got a little bit more work to finish stuff up. I expect to be in very good shape for the next meeting, but maybe Jen, if you could talk a little bit about the 2 potential increases in revenue sources that you're working on, and brief the council and get any guidance that you need on those.
Yes, thanks, Craig. So I just did a basic review of the town's sales and use tax rates, and looked at other opportunities for the town to look at the taxing structure. And I pretty quickly identified 3 different opportunities for us. The first one being a property tax increase, where we would have to go through a truth and taxation process. You have to start that process in January every year if you're going to go through that. So I did get us at least on the books with the county for a truth and taxation. I do not, though, yet, we're still working through this budget. I did put a number of $400,000 in the property tax line item, but that's not a final number. I want to be clear on that. It just kind of worked well with my drafting process to put that number in there for now as kind of a placeholder. But I have gotten feedback from this committee in the past, and I think we want to move forward with truth and taxation, and I will get you a more final number as we progress through this process. Does anybody oppose that direction?
I would just clarify that the 400 isn't 400 incremental. It's raising the number from 285 last year to 400. So we're not talking about a $400,000 property tax increase.
You're right.
It's $120,000. And just one housekeeping matter, you know, as we look at, you're trying to figure out what's going to happen this year and how they think the avalanche situation could negatively impact us. Is there going to be a budget shortfall? I would point out that on a year-to-date basis, we went into April about $170,000 ahead year on year over last year. So we had a little bit of a cushion before all of this incredible snowfall happened. And, you know, hopefully that'll help mitigate the blow.
Yes, I foresee us meeting our budget for fiscal year 23 on that, but maybe not being as fat as we might have been had we not kind of closed down the community a little bit. So then there's two other areas that I identified. One is we have an opportunity where we could increase our resort tax by 0.1%. This was actually an initiative that was brought up a couple of years ago and did not pass. Currently, that tax is 1.5, and we could go up to a total of 1.6. So that's kind of like a one-time adjustment opportunity there. And then we would be maxed out on that. I identified that revenue, if I took an average of the last 3 years, would roughly be about $68,000. And then the other tax that I've presented to the budget committee and spoken with some of you individually is a municipal transient room tax of 1%. That estimating the effects on revenue of that are, I had to rely on the state for doing that because we don't have the data in-house to be able to estimate that. But in working with them, I would say for budgetary purposes, I would estimate if we imposed that tax, it would be about $175,000. So out of kind of those three opportunities, the feedback that I've gotten so far is that maybe we do this year work with a pairing of the property tax and the municipal transient room tax and focus in those two areas this year. And then next year is next year, and we can have other discussions if we need. Does anybody have any questions about those taxes?
I thought the most interesting thing of that analysis was the chart you sent that listed all municipalities in the state and what they charged. And you see that to have this increase would still be below the median and below the mean in the state, and that our taxes really are relatively low compared to not only all municipalities, but especially when compared to other resort-oriented towns. Our aggregate tax burden is pretty low.
Yeah.
I thought that chart was really, really informative.
So, I mean, I think it's an important step in the process for us to be talking about this in public meetings and talking about it as far as, you know, making sure the community is educated, both the residents and the commercial businesses, to be able to weigh into this conversation.
I anticipate pushback from the lodges, but I think your point, John, and that chart, Jen, are important talking points in seeking buy-in. And then just a quick question. So you just wanted to drop out the 1 basis point tax increase, Jen, just to not push that this year? You're just talking about the property tax increase and this transient room tax, but
That's
I just-
correct. I wanted to identify all opportunities that I
Mhm.
saw, but based on the feedback I've gotten so far, it's been, let's focus on these two areas. Of course, if I get different direction today, I'll pivot. But that's been the direction thus far. So I just wanted to have this conversation to make sure I'm moving in the direction that the budget committee wants.
Okay, so Sheridan, you're absolutely right. And you just be prepared for a big pushback because we pay, I don't know what it is anymore, 3.5%. All of our lodges pay a 3.5% extra tax, and it all goes downtown to Salt Lake County.
yes.
So we get nothing. They throw us a bone occasionally for our ACB and ACE, but we don't really get anything. And they see that as a huge disadvantage to other people. Because you can stay downtown, rent a car and go everywhere instead of staying at Alta and paying all this extra percentage that we don't get to enjoy. So they will push, just be ready.
Yes, I think I
That's
can
where
do
I think
some,
John's-
create some materials that are educational that kind of outline this. Some of those things that I've already shared with John and other folks would be helpful, I think, in bringing people along.
Yeah, and just to emphasize, John's point, which is when you compare us to other places, the total tax take here is relatively low. And one of the things that I've observed is Alta of today is quite different than the Alta of when I bought my property here. I used to think of Alta as being a lot cheaper and sort of perhaps more bohemian than other ski resorts. But when I look at the convergence between the ticket price here and Deer Valley's ticket price, I would say we're sort of radically changing the position over the last few years. So I do think there's plenty of justification for increasing that. Although I'm sure, Sheridan, you are correct. We are going to get pushback.
And to John Goldner's point, it's still astonishing to me that we seem as a community to have very little traction in getting back some of that tax revenue. It's still absolutely labyrinthian to me that we can't have more control over that tax revenue. And then I guess, Jen, to me, that 1 basis point, why not just include that? If we're going to have a truth in taxation meaning, why don't we do all three? It seems, from my perspective.
And then just a quick, when we were looking at budget costs and there was a big issue with a UFA, Catherine Cantor wanted us to look at doing a transient room tax. She said we could save money if we joined the Unified Police District, which was not true. We did suss it out. It was a couple $100,000 more per year, and we'd have nowhere near the service. But people went a little bit nuts on that too. It's like, you're going to do a TRT on my lodge to pay for police, and we're going to have less services and more cost. We don't get any of the TRT anyway. So just a heads up.
That's a good point, that it wouldn't come to us if we did it.
Isn't that the truth and taxation solely for the property tax increase, not the others?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
The other ones take resolutions and ordinances to impose.
Well, thanks for the clarification.
So I guess I feel like I'd kind of like to hear from the mayor and from Elise as budget committee members on this. John and Craig, if you guys have anything to add, but I kind of would like some direction from the budget committee on how you want me to move forward with these three options.
Go ahead, Elise.
Oh, I mean, Jen and I talked before. I think we definitely have to have a truth and taxation hearing on the property tax. I mean, we didn't have one this last year, which I actually thought we probably should have just to keep up with inflation. We talked in past budget committee meetings about how you could do every 5 years a truth and taxation hearing, but it'd have to be a pretty big bump to keep up with everything, or you could do small incremental ones every other year or year. We are so reliant on sales tax that I think anything we can do for property tax would be beneficial. I think the other two options sound great as well. I don't know if we need to do all three this year. That might be a little intense for some people, especially the lodges, because the other two are going to impact probably the lodges and some of our other things a little bit more. I mean, I'm not against doing all three either. I just think that maybe we could temper it a little bit. The other thing that that number for our sales tax, we haven't had the best April this year with all this road stuff. So it's something to think about with our budget that we're going to be coming up with, is that we are not going to be on par with last year. I mean, maybe we will, but the month of April will not. So just another thing to think about. I think we just need to get away from sales tax as much as we can. We can't, but if we can try to find other ways, I think that's going to help us out, especially if we want to do these salary increases. We have to find a way to get that money somehow. Sorry, Jen, I don't know if that gives you any direction.
Those are all good points.
If I could say something, excuse me, our most valuable asset is our staff. And if we underpay our staff, eventually they'll feel, how should I put it, unvalued, and they'll go find someplace else. Now, Alta is a great place to be, but it's not. There's a trade-off between it being a great place to be and how much you're willing to essentially pay for that in reduced income. So I am not advocating bringing all staff members up to, say, the median level for people who work similar positions in Salt Lake City, but I am strongly in favor of bringing wages up to a level that is equitable for our circumstances. And we do, we're going to suffer a big transient with John moving to a different status. And every one of our staff members has unique qualifications and qualities that make this place work. And they are collectively our most valuable asset, which I said in the beginning.
Well put. You're right, Roger.
And I definitely agree. So that's why I think we definitely need to pursue these options that Jen has presented, because I think our staff does deserve. I mean, with the inflation the last couple of years, I don't think we've been able to keep up with our staff salaries and how things have changed, the cost of food, the cost of everything. So Jen, just really quick, the transient room tax, how much was that again, you think, based off of the state numbers?
My estimate for what I would budget would be $175,000.
And then at the resort increase, the point.
That would be,
72.
I would estimate that at $68,000, and that's based on an average of the last 3 years.
I mean, it sounds like we should do the transient room tax and the truth and taxation on property tax for now, and maybe see where that gets us for this year. And then, like you said, maybe pursue, if we need to, the resort tax increase. I mean, it makes sense.
I think from an analysis standpoint, you should look at all three, Jen. And then, but my guess is we're only going to do 2 out of the 3, but let's at least get the numbers to make it clear so that everybody understands what the decision is.
Well, and the only thing I'd throw in is like the resort option tax. I mean, that's ours. That's almost a given. I mean, they give that, the state gives that to us because they know the tiny little resort communities with 80% Forest Service and very little property tax. They know that we can't supply the services, even though we have 200 people, and any given day we have 5,200 people. So that's kind of ours, and that should be a gimme.
Yeah.
So I would say you leave that in.
So you're advocating for the resort tax increase of 0.1%.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems like
other ones?
that seems like the least offensive and the easiest. I mean, it's gonna be pretty hard to do a lot of complaining about 0.1% increase in the tax rate. That's gonna be barely noticeable. And
it would be spread across all the businesses.
and really paid for by the business customers as opposed to an increase in
Mhm.
property tax, which is actually paid for by the businesses themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to wind this up shortly because it's 5 minutes to our next meeting. Any closing remarks here on from any of our
So are we
participants?
sharing with you our comments on the budget draft? No, you're gonna revise the budget draft and
Yeah.
go with the next meeting?
Yeah, just do it at the next meeting.
Okay.
But if there's I encourage you, I mean, if you have questions or about certain line items, or, I mean, obviously, the way the budget was presented for this meeting, you know, there's some formatting changes there. You know, I tried to put a whole bunch of notes there, but this is my current draft, right? So I felt like it was probably important and insightful for me to be sharing that with you as far as where I'm at. So I'm more than happy to answer questions, dive into anything with anybody individually, and I expect we'll have a much more complete budget by the next meeting.
And John, to that, I did reach out to see if you and Jen and I can get a Zoom fairly soon, because I think that'll help us from presentation purposes to make sure that stuff is quite clear.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that next week. And, you know, I don't have any like earth shattering comments. And I think we've talked about most of the sort of ACVB type impacts. I think somebody today raised a good point about, you know, if ACVB is going to go away, we want to make some provision for ACE.
Yeah.
Those were the kind of the things that my comments, none of them were $100,000 comments. They were all sort of smaller and more miscellaneous.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you
and
guys. That
Jen.
was nice work, you guys.
Roger, you're muted.
Do we need a motion to adjourn? Okay, I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're adjourned. All right, so in 3 minutes, we'll restart.
So the question is whether I have to put in the stairs and watch it on YouTube because they haven't seen it before they're ready to take off the headphones.
I can do that. What do you prefer?
I just need
Well, it's 4 o'clock and I'd like to call to order the April 12th meeting of the Alta Town Council. This meeting is electronic without an anchor location, which is pretty fortunate because most people could not get to our anchor location if we had it there.
I don't know, we have to clarify,
And,
but it's 2 o'clock.
Did I say 4 o'clock or did I say 2 o'clock? 1400, 2 o'clock. Yeah. And so in accordance with the determination I made in a letter earlier this year, where this is being held without an anchor location. So let's proceed. The first matter of business is public input, citizen input. Are there any citizens who have expressed an interest in providing some comments? Jan or Molly?
No one reached out to me ahead of time to speak, but if there is anyone here listening in that would like to make a comment, just raise your hand in Zoom with the bottom toolbar and I'll enable your video.
And Mayor, we did receive one written comment from Jerry Oyama that requested
Yeah.
to be a part of this meeting. So that's been dispersed to the council, and that comment will be a part of the meeting minutes.
Very good. Okay. All right.
And I don't
well,
see any.
The first item of business I would like to has to do with a resolution honoring public safety personnel, and I would like to read a preamble to that. What I propose. The past 30 days have greatly stressed our community. Our town has been subject to some unprecedented challenges, which so far we've been able to meet. Some of the emergency equipment was supposed to automatically activate, didn't. Human intervention saved the day. Here's a partial, and I recommend, and I emphasize partial list of notable events. On the 15th of March, a roof slide in front of the Superior Point condos buried a 9-year-old child. Deputy Ted Spencer was on this in moments and started an avalanche probe and found the buried child. The child was airlifted and recovered. This hero saved a kid's life, and I'm going to talk more about that later. On the 23rd of March, a power pole above the community center broke due to snow load. That left the building without power for a couple of days. But within that, with the help of Dan Foxman and others, power was restored to that building. On the 24th, a natural slide came across Highway 210 in early afternoon. Interlodge was declared shortly after 2 o'clock. Everyone got off the mountain and into shelters. There were more than 1,100 visitors who were sheltered in that period. Vigorous avalanche control was conducted. Interlodge was lifted and the road opened at 6:45. But another closure occurred at 10 p.m. that night. And in between those times, 6:45 and 10, our marshals and dispatches were able to clear the town and get all who needed to on their way down the canyon. On the 28th of March, the community center started to show signs of stress under the snow load. So the town commissioned snow shovelers to clear the roof to prevent collapse. On the 29th, a town-wide power failure occurred around 6 p.m. Some of the auto start generators did not come on. Alta Central lost its communications and servers for a period. In one neighborhood, cell phone service and water were also lost. Power and water were restored to most of the town by the next morning and to all by late afternoon on the 30th. On the 1st of this month, Mike Morey sent out the following message to Chris Scully, avalanche forecasters, Sean Wright, Jake Treadwell, Dave Fields, Dave Richards, Randy Kaiser. Mike Mon, Jake Brown, Colemanworth, and Cottonwood Canyon. And the message says, hello, friends. There really aren't words powerful enough to thank you all for the tireless and monumental heavy lifting you've all done to protect lives and livelihoods in Little Cottonwood Canyon. We're in uncharted territory that even many of the legends that taught us our jobs have not seen. It is right now, without exception, our duty to measure every step we take based on a single goal, protection of the entire canyon. I'm writing to share what's on my mind. I won't try to, quote, pull a garbage truck with a Subaru, unquote, while we're in these conditions. I'll be pushing hard to not be open when we shouldn't be, not put more people on the canyons than we should, and when there's uncertainty about getting them out, and not pushing already overstressed resources beyond their capabilities. I'm asking all of you to act along these same lines. The next round might test us harder. We'll get through it if we act together. Thanks for your Mike. So then on April 2nd, next day, the real trouble started. A huge storm hit us with more than 5 feet of snow in over 3 days. The road closed, interlodge was declared. And the next day, the 3rd, in anticipation of the danger to the community in the next few days post, Mike Mon deputized the entire Alta Ski Patrol and dispatchers to help with interlodge enforcement. 2 days later, the 5th, a break in the storm brought some relief, but the snow clearing and avalanche protection required continued interlodge and road closures. On the 6th, a natural slide at entry 4. There was a natural slide at entry 4, and immediate interlodge and mountain closure was declared. The day after that, the 7th, SR2 canyon openings were significantly restricted due to avalanche threat. The road was closed from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and overnight. On the 8th, ending high temperatures led to the threat of landslides threatening our town and the surroundings. An alert was issued for possible future directives and actions. On the 9th and beyond, vehicle and foot travel were severely limited throughout the town, and the road was closed until further notice. So my synopsis of this is that several items in our infrastructure failed. What didn't fail was our community and our people. I recall Hano describing an era when, quote, the lifts were made of wood and the men were made of steel. Well, the lifts are no longer wood, but the people, men and women, and I want to emphasize it's both men and women, are still steel. If I step back and ask, how was it that we went through this period with no injuries, no serious damage, everyone safe, and everyone prepared? How were so many willing and able to step up with little rest to tackle this event so effectively? Because of our commitment to our community, all those named in Mike's message quoted above, plus all our dispatchers who run Alta Central round the clock to ensure our emergency services are always there when needed. The principal credit is due to the leadership of our incredible Marshal, Mike Morey. There are not enough hero medals to go around, even if there are many are due them. But if I had only 2, I would pin them on Deputy Ted Spencer, who saved a 9-year-old child, and our never defeated Mike Morey. So with that preamble, I would like to introduce Resolution 2023 R5, a resolution recognizing and honoring Alta's Marshal's Office, personnel, first responders, town staff, and assisting citizens. Whereas the Alta Marshal's Office, AMO, under the leadership of Marshal Mike Morey, is composed of 13 personnel tasked with the responsibility of keeping all occupants of the town safe to the extent possible and to enforce the law. And whereas the winter season of this year has been particularly challenging with historic amounts of snowfall and winter storms. And whereas on March 15, 2023, the following events took place. At 5:23 p.m., the Salt Lake Valley Emergency Communications Center, which is called VEC, transferred a 911 call to the AMO Central Dispatch regarding a 9-year-old male who had been buried by a roof slide at the Superior Point condos. Dispatcher Chris Templin immediately broadcast a general call to respond to all those who monitor the Alta Central channel. Within 2 minutes of that call, Deputy Ted Spencer arrived and immediately deployed an avalanche probe and shovel, successfully making a probe strike of the victim within a few attempts. UDOT avalanche forecasting team members Kevin Payne, Dan Kostachuk, Kyle Frederick, and Lori Delaney also all responded and began assisting Deputy Spencer. Together, the responders removed the male victim from underneath approximately 3 feet of dense, compacted snow, and recovery was accomplished approximately 4 minutes from the time of the initial call. Upon extraction, the juvenile was semi-conscious, experiencing difficulty breathing. An ambulance from UFA Station 113, members of Unified Police, Canyon Patrol, and other Marshal's Office personnel arrived shortly. UFA paramedics assumed medical care for the juvenile. UPD officers and members of the Alta Ski Patrol coordinated with response and landing of a light flight helicopter at the ski area base. Juvenile was transported from the landing zone and subsequently flown to Primary Children's Hospital in a stabilized condition. The Marshal's Office learned from family members that the juvenile is expected to completely recover from the burial and is doing very well. Whereas the response to this action by everyone in the Alta community is testament to the skill, professionalism, and intense dedication of the first responders and citizens that serve, work, and live in Little Cottonwood Canyon. Without immediate actions and clear thinking, everybody involved, this incident may have ended very differently. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the town of Alta, by the town council of Alta, that the council first honors Marshal Mike Mooring, Deputy Ted Spencer, Dispatcher Chris Temlin, UDOT Avalanche Forecasting Team, Kevin Payne, Dan Kostachek, Kyle Frederick, and Lori Delaney, and other assisting AMO personnel, VEC Dispatch, UFA Station 113 paramedics, UPD, Canyon Patrol, and Alta Ski Patrol. Second, recognizes the remarkable courage and honor of those in law enforcement who display and the work they do to keep our community safe. And third, extends our heartfelt appreciation to all of the Alta community for selflessly acting to care for others and making Alta such a wonderful place to work and recreate. I recommend we adopt this resolution. Any comments?
I'll second the resolution, and would it be appropriate to have a round of applause for our people, or maybe we should vote first? Are we all in favor of the ordinance?
Yeah.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Resolution passes. All right.
Well stated, Roger. That was a beautiful synopsis of what occurred.
Any other comments?
I'm humbled to know you, and I think I speak for everyone in saying we love you all.
I do have a comment, which is I think I'm probably closer to what's going on in the town than most of the people in the Alta community. That said, I didn't know half of the things that you cited, in the preamble beforehand. And particularly when we're, increasing the salaries and maybe talking about doing some increases in taxes, I think it would be well worth the time if you had a letter from the mayor that went out to the entire Alta community, just detailing how hard the staff has been working over the last month, and just giving them the fact base so that they can be as well informed. about what's going on in Alta as possible. And I think they have done heroic work, and I think the entire community needs to understand that.
Okay, since I have the written down, it'll be easier to do. Are there any other follow-up to this? Mike, would you like to say anything?
Well, thank you for those powerful words, and we're just really fortunate that we've been able to attract the people that we have to the first responder community in this town. And I always hate it very much when you put my name at the first of these kind of things. I'm a guy that sits in a truck and tells other people to do hard things, and the people that are doing these hard things from the 9-year-old forward is really where the heavy lifting is being done, and the thanks are due. We're just super grateful to have the team that we do.
Well, so am I. I'm super grateful. Okay. It took a little longer on this topic than we scheduled, but I think it was well spent time. All right. We move on. Wade Fudge, I see you're here, although I don't see your, there you go. Oh, no, that's not Wade. Wade, I don't see your face, Wade. But there you are. So I recall a night, it was 9 years ago, last February. You and I were sitting on the steps going up to the Alta Library. And the reason we were there is because we're waiting for the then town council to figure out what they were going to, what their position was on the proposal that the estate had made for development of their property. So those discussions led to an agreement between the town and your client, and on how to proceed.
Right.
Well, now it's 9 years later. We're 9 years older. You probably don't appreciate being reminded that, just like I don't.
Definitely 9 years long.
And but we have a different town council, and evidently your client's thoughts on how to proceed have evolved. So we've invited you here today to talk about that evolution. But I want to point out that this is not a decision-making forum. This is not a public hearing in a formal sense.
Right.
This is just informational. And so it is not expected to take any action at this point, but we would like to hear what you have to say. So
thank you so much, Mike. And I do recall, and I believe Sean was there with us, so I do recall those days on the step, or that night on the steps.
That night on the steps, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Since that date 9 years ago, we've done various infrastructure improvements, and as we were doing those improvements, we continued to receive input from a number of members of the community and stakeholders. And one of the opportunities that we've seen as a potential available opportunity would be to revise the deal, to have it be one focused on a hotel, and to preserve everything above the summer road. And we've received very valuable input from John on your team and other council members, including Councilmember Byrne. And we've presented back in July of 2021 a proposal. We've revised that, and we've engaged a consultant who's been involved in a lot of mountain community development, Doug Ogilvie, and he's on the screen here today, and he's prepared a presentation. So I'd like to turn the time over to him, but just to indicate this at the outset before I do so, we understand that no action will be taken, but what we're looking for is input. And what we're looking for is whether there's any desire on the part of the town to interact along these terms. And if that's the case, that would be great. But we thought it would be helpful for the town to hear where we've evolved the plans from our last discussion. So with that, I'll turn it to Doug.
All right, thank you, Wade. I'm going to go for a screen share here. So I think yes, you're now seeing my screen. So as Wade said, I've been involved in basically the mountain resort development business since 1995 and multiple resorts in British Columbia, California, Nevada, Utah. So Wade asked me to get involved in this project. The history on this, as you pointed out, is back in 2014, 10 single family lots were improved for the Patsy Marley property. In 2019, Wade approached me going, feedback from the community was, although there was an existing agreement in place, some people were, less fond of what had previously been agreed. And Wade said, can we come up with a solution that might be, more acceptable to the town and still acceptable to the property owners? And we really looked at it and we said, hey, if we built a condo hotel on the bottom 4 acres of the property, we could preserve the top 20 acres of the property as conservation easement and generate, very significant transient room tax for the town and property tax for the town in the process. So we went through a number of iterations internally and ultimately presented something to the town that I think we sent the slides in first, but we met with the town in July 2021 for a work session where we basically presented a conceptual plan that showed 48 hotel rooms and 34 condos. And we compared that to the visual impact of building 10 single family homes on the property. We got so that was we thought a very useful session. In June 2022, we had a chance to meet with town representatives again to discuss that 2021 concept. And in that review, we kind of called it a design charrette session. We got feedback from the representatives in the room saying, we're interested in continuing to explore this concept, but we think it would be more acceptable to the community if we basically took the concept and increased the footprint of the project and then reduced the building height in the process. So the original concept, there was concern that the height was a little overwhelming, and if we could reduce the height by increasing the footprint, it might be more favorably received. So we took that feedback and we met back to the design team and we revised the concept to one showing 50 hotel rooms and 25 condos. We think the building massing improved significantly in this next iteration. It reduced the building height, especially adjacent ski trail. We also really fleshed out further what the interior of the hotel would be to better understand the amenities that would be there, both for the hotel guests and the community. And we updated our visual impact studies. So if we, flipping forward, I think you're all very familiar with the 24-acre site. Sitting on the side of the hill. So current 2014 approval is 10 home sites within this yellow polygon. The new proposal is a condo hotel or a hotel in the bottom corner below the Summer Road. Going back, here's the 2014 approval. Those are the development pads for the different homes in the parking lot. So to do a visual impact study on that, we basically just did simple block models. We said, okay, what does a house look like on each one of these? And we had a 3D rendering created to show what that might look like. So this is it's obviously not architecture, but it's giving you an idea where 10 homes built under the existing entitlements would be and what the approximate mass of those buildings would be. There's a bird's eye view looking down on it. So then we went back to plan B was, let's put a conservation easement on the 20 acres above the road and build below the road. The project site is kind of defined by blue, but there is a driveway would come across below the Summer Road tying in, near I guess that'd be the northwest property line, the western property line. Yeah, this is not architecture, this is just building massing. So this is the This is the concept we shared with the town in 2021 and a subsequent session in 2022. This concept was trying to preserve some trees in this corner of the site. So that was our first study. This is a view from the Snow Pine Inn. So the building was generally seen as stacking up very vertically, although it was stepping back. The perception from much of the town was a fairly vertical building. So that was the request to adjust it. So here we came back in September 22. We prepared the updated concept, which we submitted to town. So you can see how we've expanded the footprint to really utilize all of the area in that blue corner of the property with driveways coming in. The upper driveway comes to an auto court where you check in. The lower driveway goes to the underground parking. So the entire project was contemplated as underground parking. Zooming in a little, again, there's the main lower footprint. So we're building into the hill with spa fitness facilities on the upper side. We've got a restaurant and a lobby bar on the main floor, hotel rooms, meeting facilities, and swimming pool out down closer to the ski trail. In terms of just a section through the property, our goal was to keep the building height more modest adjacent to the ski trail. It's basically four stories adjacent to the ski trail, stepping up as you go against the site. There's the summer road on the top right. So the building is, the majority of the building is below the summer road. It's projecting in this section 2 stories above the summer road. So again, we did a 3D model of this. So you can see how the building, it's going to get different wings and it steps back. We think architecturally, this building massing is much more interesting than the first concept we shared. There's another bird's eye view. So again, you see how it's stepping back. There's much less building mass next to the ski run. If you're skiing down, your focus will be what you see in front of the, closer. Going back to that same view from the Snow Pine Inn, you can see the building mass has dropped significantly. And really a building is fitting in with the heights of the adjacent trees. As you know, you've got some beautiful snow pine trees in this whole Alta Valley. So the building is, it's a significant building, but it's of a height that the trees can definitely benefit in terms of providing some filtering of the views of it and some backdrop. This isn't dealing with the color palette or detailed architecture. It's dealing with massing. So in terms of the condo hotel alternative, we see some very significant community benefits going this route relative to the 10 single family lots. We would conserve 20 acres above the summer road under conservation easement. That's an area that the community's, shown a lot of interest in leaving in its natural condition. The transient room tax on hotel rooms and short-term rentals of condos is quite significant. You're seeing it at the various properties in Alta. We're seeing it at the properties at Deer Valley. These things rent at very healthy nightly rentals and generate very significant TRT. And it doesn't matter if it's a hotel room or a condo, the rental TRT is very significant. I've been involved in this business, as I said, since 1995. If you go back over the last 30 years in the ski resort business, most major ski hotels have relied on condos to fund construction. Nearby, the first one was the Stein Erikson. That was followed by the St. Regis Deer Valley, the Montage Deer Valley. Over at Canyons, you had the Hyatt, the Waldorf, most recently the Pendry. I was involved, the Westin in Mammoth was my project. The Limelight up in Sun Valley was funded that way. I was also involved in the design and the approvals of the Four Seasons at Whistler, again, funded that way. So in addition to all the tax revenue coming out of this property, which I think is, quite significant given the financial burden on a town as small as yours. A project like this would also provide, a restaurant, another gathering place for locals. We would have conference facilities within the building, which again, give you another opportunity for places to meet. But the prime benefits are 20 acres preserved under conservation easement and, you know, significant tax revenues. And as an alternative to building 10 single family homes with limited tax revenues and, you know, greater visual impact and impact on the meadow. So if you're going back to our earlier slide, you see the condo hotel site at the bottom that would be impacted by the development of this project as proposed, and the conservation easement above, which could all be preserved. So we're ultimately, you know, ownership's goal is to, you know, develop their property in a manner that makes economic sense. The 2014 project is, you know, is approved to have a right to go forward, but we've taken a step backwards and said, is there an alternative solution that is going to be more favorably received by the town and still works for the ownership group? And our thinking is the community benefits associated with a project like we've proposed are quite significant, and we really like to explore it with the council members and see what thoughts or questions you might have. So why don't I stop talking and open it up to comments or questions.
And one more just before we do that. We've understood from prior discussions that the condominium concept is not one well received in the town. And so we'd really like to get a sense of how the mass and the height and the concepts that we've put forward would be received, because that's really the structure that we're looking at. We can obviously work within the framework of a hotel, pure hotel, even though that's not common. But we're trying to understand how the mass and the location and the height and those elements work or don't work, so we can understand where to put our attention and to put our efforts in this matter.
Okay, so any comments by our council or staff?
Anybody else like to? I have a couple of comments, but I'm happy to not go first if somebody else is ready.
Go ahead, John.
Well, the first thing, could you back up to the slide that is depicting you described as depicting the current settlement agreement? The slide looks something like this. The multicolored.
Right here.
Yeah, that one. I struggle with this slide. My understanding of the settlement agreement, and I'm not as expert on the settlement agreement as the rest of you. My understanding of the settlement agreement is that none of the homes is to exceed 8,500 square feet.
So what this slide is showing is the allowable disturbance area, and then I can't remember the exact square footage of each home. So each home would be built within the pink areas. So the subsequent slide here's an approximate footprint of what one of those homes would look like, and then I just rendered that as basically a 2-story structure with a roof on it.
Yeah, but the mass in the picture that follows this, the next slide, those masses are capped at 8,500 square feet.
Let's see what that is the intent of that. Is I basically have taken the footprint shown and I've projected that. I believe it's over 2 stories with some massing for a roof to give an approximation of what the building massing might be.
Yeah, I guess what was confusing to me is it looked like those were based on these 11,000, 12,000 foot numbers. And to be compliant with the settlement agreement, 8,500 is the limit. I'd also say that parking structure that's in green is much larger than is authorized by the settlement agreement.
That is the footprint from the settlement agreement, shown as 180 feet by 85 feet. It's right off the drawings. And I've rendered it by the height from the drawings that went with that.
I believe the settlement agreement.
I understood that the settlement agreement was limited to 20 spaces. So that building looks significantly larger. I don't want to argue about it again, but it seems like this is a little bit overstated when you say this may be what you'd like to build, but I personally don't think you're entitled to build this as of today.
So
I
that,
think your entitlement today is really limited to the settlement agreement, and that's an important point. Let's move on, because I know there's a ton of other things here. You know, when we've met, and I think the design has improved dramatically over the last 2 years, 18 months. I think the design's getting a whole lot closer. I'm really glad, it pleases me, Wade, that you guys are hearing us when we're saying that, you know, we just cannot allow condos in this area. It's just not going to happen in the base facility zone. So it seems like you're accepting that. I think that's great. And so that to me means there's one other significant prerequisite to you know, a more favorable attitude and you know, potentially moving forward with you, and that is you just really need to accept this 60-foot height limit. And we'd love to see you present a design that was compliant with the current base facility zoning. And I think we've been pretty consistent in saying that the path to a permit is through the existing base facility zoning ordinance. And, you know, we're very interested in talking with you about any design that complies with the base facility zoning. And we're willing to, even though your property isn't currently zoned for the base facility, we'd very much consider it upzoning of your property if you were sending us a design that wasn't predicated on condo sales, and B, met the physical limitations of the base facility zone.
There are multiple limitations in there, council member. Is the height the one that you're most concerned about?
I think we're concerned about them all, and I think our zoning ordinance speaks for itself, but the short answer to that would have been yes. I think the one that gives us the most indigestion, or the only significant indigestion for me, is the height. So,
and just understand, we're trying to achieve the heights below the summer road so we can protect above the summer road. And if we have to apply the base facility, our concern is we're not able to preserve everything above the summer road. And so we'll look at that, and with that thought in mind, but we do recognize at the outset that presents a challenge, but as you can tell, we're intrepid. So we'll take a look at that.
and we're just trying to be straight up and deal with you in a straightforward and direct manner. And, you know, like I say, I think that the design's come a long way in the last 18 months. And I'm excited about that personally. The property is shaping up. It looks like a lovely property. But you're going to have to get it down to 60 feet. And I think if you do that, you're certainly, you know, in the ball game and in the ballpark. And we'll look forward to seeing such a design that's compliant with the base facility zone and continuing this conversation.
I'd kind of like to leave this conversation for the time being there, unless there's someone else who wants to make some urgent comment. I think John has said what I would have said, which was give it another try, complying with the constraints of the base facility zone. So, and then we would be happy to have you back.
Yep, excellent. I couldn't add anything to what John Byrne just said. It's like, wow, I can go home now. Wait a minute, I am at home.
One
So,
other
yeah,
thing, and I guess because this proposed zone, this new overlay zone, or it's really a zone request, is so tied to their application, but I don't think that there would be any, just from what I've heard, I don't think that we're going to have any direction from council to consider this zone. I mean, is there any interest in pursuing a zone like this? It's just so that we can put that piece to rest.
My feeling would be that, you know, they're not in the base facility zone. We recognize the value of the land conservation and we applaud it. But that our response to that would be that we would consider and pursue or work with you in pursuit of your property being included into the existing base facility zone. But I think there's not a lot of appetite to create another zoning district within our town.
Okay, shall we leave it there?
Thanks for your time, Wade, and I think the project's coming along nicely. I mean, the design iterations are, every one of them is more attractive than the last one, and I hope you stick with it. I hope you keep going down this path. And
Doug,
thanks
Doug,
for
yeah,
your
Doug
time
knows
today.
his art. Doug definitely knows what he's doing. So appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Doug and Wade. And let us move on to update on potential tolling in Little Cottonwood Canyon. I think Josh is with us, and many of us were interested that there was a considerable amount of money given to the Wasatch Front WSRC Regional Council to, among other things, create a tolling arrangement. And for those of us who use this road, that could actually affect us. So, Josh, talk to us about that.
So I apologize. I am not actually familiar with that. I was just told to talk about tolling today, so I didn't know that was the specific thing.
Yeah, didn't I say tolling? Yeah, talk about
You
tolling.
did, but the WFRC allocation, I'm unaware of.
Well, that's a side issue. Let's just
All right.
let's just talk about tolling.
Perfect. So let me just hit a couple of points, and then I can hopefully answer any questions that you all might have. So we are considering, and I say tolling, but it's really traffic demand management, right? So that may include tolling and or vehicle occupancy restrictions. I might remind you that currently there is no automated technology that is reliable enough for vehicle occupancy detection. But again, I think that's moving along nicely and maybe a viable alternative sooner rather than later. But today that is not a technology that's reliable enough. So that's why I say tolling. But again, every time I say tolling, think this could apply to traffic demand management. And really occupancy restrictions, variable rates based on occupancy. But without that technology out there today, really, I say tolling. So traffic demand management strategies are really only considered roughly 50 days a year. So this would be winter time. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that it would line up with Alta's reservation days, right? So think Friday, Saturday, Sundays, holidays, right? And I think this year there was about 50 days. So roughly those same periods. There might be a little variation, but generally, and also potentially powder days, right? Those, as we've seen, huge numbers of canyon goers on random Tuesdays when the snow is great. So again, roughly 50 days per year. There is a clause in there in the EIS, and I'm sure many of you have poured thousands of hours of reading thousands of pages of documents. So I want to just point out one line that I think you would be interested in. And that's potentially residents of Little Cottonwood Canyon, drivers of service vehicles, resort employees could be exempt from paying the toll, and we would need to work with FHWA on this. And Mayor, I know we've had some discussions outside of this surrounding it. Interestingly, the existing FHWA, what's listed in the Code of Federal Regulations, 23 CFR, specifically under the SOV and tolling, does not have exceptions. for residents, delivery vehicles, things like that. But we would likely be pursuing a tolling application based on the value pricing pilot program, which is a pilot program that's been renewed and allows a little more flexibility for things like this. So again, we feel like that is a viable option for, residents, delivery vehicles. Right now, there's for tolling or for single occupancy vehicles, there's only exceptions allowed for motorcycles and bicycles. Obviously, both are not very useful in January in Little Cottonwood. Possible, not particularly practical. The other part of this is we wouldn't implement tolling until there is increased transit service for low-income populations, right? This is national forest, a lot of it, and I think everybody has the right to get to their national forest in a fair way. So until there is some low-income fare through transit service, we wouldn't apply the toll. And the toll is pretty substantial that's being considered, right? I'm sure you've all heard this. It's anticipated that's going to be in the $25 to $30 range. I'm hopeful that many people will take transit because it's the right thing to do, and we can get that conversion from people out of their vehicles into transit for a much smaller toll. And if that's the case, the toll will be lower. Of course, the opposite of that is also true. If we're not getting transit ridership at the levels we need at a $30 toll, it may increase to get to that threshold. We are considering only tolling the Upper Canyon, so the tolling gantry would likely be above White Pine and below Snowbird Entry 1. But that does, of course, the entire town of Alta limits are above Snowbird Entry 1. So, and I know that point has been confusing. People are like, well, you're not tolling Snowbird, but you're tolling Alta. No, it would be below Snowbird Entry 1, but above White Pine Trailhead. And the other part of this is associated with that 50 days a year. It's anticipated that it would only be between the hours of basically 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. So it is not an all-day thing. It's really designed to just get people transitioned to transit during those busy AM peak times. So that's the really brief synopsis of tolling. And we have some fact sheets and stuff on our website that, and of course, in chapter 32, we have some responses, and Bree, maybe you can drop those links in the chat for everybody. And you can open those in another browser window to save them, or Control-C, Control-V onto another page to review them later. But that is the very brief overview on tolling. So what questions didn't I answer? What can I help with?
Well, one is apparently you're thinking of tolling only in one direction, up.
So that is what is discussed in the EIS. So we haven't necessarily, we don't believe we need to toll on the way down if we can get 30% of the vehicles not coming up, right? Because our goal is to get to that 1,000 vehicles per hour where roadways generally stable. So the thought process is by reducing the AM peak and then adding, the different durations of any given individual ski day, that the red snake at the end of the day will also be lessened, if not resolved.
Mm-hmm. Karen,
Thank you
want
for
to
your-
say something?
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you, Josh. Why such a wildly different model than what's happening in American Fork or Mill Creek, or even the national parks, where tolling happens basically throughout the entire day, and you pay something much, much less expensive than, an annual pass for $80 or $5 up?
So that's a true statement, but when you look at congestion pricing in New York City, so American Fork, Mirror Lake Highway, those are actually recreation fees that are imposed by the Forest Service. They are not designed to reduce peak hour traffic. Again, that's to help them, maintain bathrooms and all the other safety throughout the national forest. But congestion-based pricing models are, again, really trying to disperse people out of that peak. Again, this isn't a money-making opportunity. In fact, there's actually probably very little money that will be generated out of this when you consider back-end office costs and infrastructure costs associated with it. So it's just a different problem that the Forest Service is trying to solve versus peak hour congestion pricing. Did that answer your question?
Thank you. Sort of. It just seems implausible to me that it's not a money-making venture when we're going to be charging $25 per vehicle up the canyon at peak times. And then I guess I don't see how this isn't similar to the problems that the Forest Service is trying to prevent, and that I see the change in behavior that happens at Mill Creek. I see the change in behavior that happens at American Fork in terms of forcing people to carpool or strongly encouraging people to carpool. And yeah, I'm just curious about the thinking and the methodology and the philosophy around this. That seems, I'm just questioning it.
No, that's fair. And like I said, I mean, if $25, if we get great transit ridership and reduce the number of cars on the road for a lesser dollar amount, our goal is honestly just to get people out of their private vehicles and get 30% of the cars off the road. So if we can do that for a lesser value, we absolutely will. The corresponding argument to that is many of these people have spent, are buying a day ticket, which, is rather expensive, or have spent $1,200+ on a season pass, and $5 won't actually drive behavior. That being said, I do understand, because I'm one of those people that frequently parks in the park and ride at Mill Creek and rides my bike up the extra mile rather than paying $5 to park at the bottom of Rattlesnake. So again, if you were right, it is likely that the toll may be reduced.
Carolyn, it looked like you want to say something.
Yes. So I want to say thanks for exploring the option of tolling the road. I have thought that is the way to go all along. I think it will substantially change behavior, but I'm picturing this. So a crowded weekend, and you're going to allow people to get most of the way up the canyon in their car that they shouldn't have driven up in the first place. And then they're going to somehow get turned around because they don't want to pay the $20 or $25. And what happens to those people in the middle of the road? I'm just picturing this incredible cluster. And I'm thinking that if you were told at the bottom, I've always envisioned this, there's space at the bottom to toll people. And I'm shocked by the comment of tolling people most of the way up here. I'm just picturing a major cluster.
And again, we would create a safe turnaround spot. We would also have numerous points of signage before they entered the canyon. That being said, I think some people will clearly just ignore any VMS sign, right? So you're
giving people too much credit. I mean, we have if you haven't driven this road enough, you haven't seen the incredible cars that come up and down, and you're like, what were you thinking? And so I just can't imagine that people don't read signs. That's why there's dogs up here. People can't read.
I think most people can read. They just don't think the signs apply to them because they're better than that, right? That's a great idea for you, not for me. I'm special. So, but I think it is important to toll the upper canyon. And we can talk more about this, but again, because it's national forest, right? If the Forest Service wants to impose recreation fees on those sites in the lower canyon, interestingly enough, none of the sites they're considering as part of their tolling study. And if you're not familiar with that, I would say reach out, or recreation fee. None of the sites overlap currently, our tolling sites and that. But again, I just don't know that it's because, right, you can drive American Fork or Mirror Lake for free if you don't stop your car, right? There's no fee if you drive right through to Evanston or Midway, right? And that's why they're recreation fees. And I think it's important to keep national forest access to all the dispersed recreation users, whether that be climbers, bird watchers, anglers, just people that want to enjoy nature. So
Josh, I could imagine that just below the toll booth, there'd be a lot of roadside parking.
So that is a great question. I will emphasize that immediately below the toll booth, there is anticipated to be about 3,800 feet of snow sheds, right? Because they come up to just below White Pine, the old, or just above China Wall. And we have a 1/4 mile no parking restriction. And that is something I'm concerned about. Basically, the solitude model, right? Where people don't want to pay to park there. So the first thing that fills up is the roadside. That is something that we will need to consider. I know Salt Lake County is currently considering changing their ordinance for the roadside parking violation fee, right? That's $25 currently. It's actually cheaper than valet parking at Snowbird, right? I mean, if you don't mind walking, you can save $15.
Cheaper than a lunch. So when would you expect to implement this tolling plan?
And so, great question. We cannot implement it prior to there being additional transit service. So if, Mayor, I know you know this, but I don't know if anybody else in attendance knows this. The Utah legislature, as associated with SB2, allocated $150 million specifically, and only to, and I can't emphasize this enough, increased and enhanced bus service, mobility hub, resort bus stops, and tolling infrastructure in Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons, right? So the state of Utah has literally put $150 million commitment into getting the bus service off the ground. And so while I've talked to many of you and said, trust me, we are going to give bus service a fair shake, I think we can now say that we put $150 million of money where our mouth is. So I hope that builds a little more trust than me just saying, trust me. That being said, tolling cannot begin until those buses are in service. And we anticipate a record of decision this summer, at which time we'll begin designing the mobility hub, working with Cottonwood Heights on that, get the buses, look into different procurement options for the buses, and start making progress forward. It is anticipated that that process may take up to 2 years, or I shouldn't say up to, but may take 2 years. That being said, supply chain issues seem to be, looking better lately. We saw the March inflation rate was 5%, so that's coming down as reported today. I mean, it's looking better. So I'm feeling a little more optimistic that we might be able to beat 2 years. That being said, I'm not feeling confident enough to say I can guarantee it today.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Josh, this is, you've eliminated a lot of this. I think we will move on to, out to the ski area update with Mike Mon. So you want to promote him, Molly or Jen, or? Thanks for coming, Josh.
Thank you all.
Think I'm
Okay.
on. Can you hear me?
Yes, you got your red hat on. What's
I
that
do have my
signify?
Thank you for the opportunity to give you a little update. You know, we've, as has been talked about, it's been a historic winter and we've had many firsts this winter for all of us, many of us here, and really pleased with the cooperation that we've seen in the broader community between the town of Alta and Unified and Sandy and the UDOT and the forecasters and Alta and Snowbird. I think we've pulled together quite well in trying to keep it's safe and take care of people and, you know, provide some recreation so people don't go stir crazy during this part in time. And it's going to be a year to remember and a year that we will refer back for years to come. So we're hoping, you know, our scheduled closing date is April 23rd, a week from this Sunday. We will see what happens this weekend and with the road and the forecast and such. It is not out of the question that we could pull the plug a little earlier, but as of right now, we're hoping that things will allow us to get some more public up and have some skiing experiences this next week if the avalanche danger diminishes and the road can get open to that. So that's kind of what our plan is in that regard. As has been mentioned earlier in your meeting, you know, it has impacted revenues throughout the Alta community. You know, we were going into April and it looked like it was going to be a strong April and that our revenues would be greater overall for the ski area than last season. It's looking like now that we'll be closer to last season's revenues, if not a little under, by the time we get to the end of the season. In regards to, you know, we recently, you know, I want to thank the town for joining us in the community letter that we did send to UDOT, bringing attention to the cause of the red snake, or one of the major causes that we have here at Alta, with the merging of vehicles of traffic and the closing of the main line. We followed that letter up with some potential solutions to discuss and some actual modeling that we sent to UDOT. And we're hoping we have a meeting set up here next month sometime to start exploring maybe some solutions that can improve upon how we get people out of Alta and minimize or at least make the exit a little bit more equitable between Alta and Snowbird. We've just in regards for the summer that's upcoming, it's just around the corner. Got to let snow melt for a while first, but we have no plans to plow the summer road at the end of this season. We'll just let it melt out. We may do some plowing here around the Wildcat base to get it to so it can dry out a little sooner. Some projects we have here. As far as projects that we're looking at this summer, we have 5 more VESAN towers to install on Mount Baldy. We're looking at making adjustment to the top of the Wildcat ramp to allow the buses to make the turn if the bus service is able to come back and be able to service not only Wildcat, but Albion lots and the stops within the town of Alta. We are due to replace our fuel island, our fuel tanks. The state has come to us and said it's time. And so we're working with the state to replace those fuel tanks this summer up behind the cat shop. We have around the Albion, the Wildcat base here, we'll be replacing some of the snowmaking lines. They've kind of gotten to the end of their useful life. Some of the ones that have been in here the longest amount of time. Doing right around here base this year, potentially we'll have to go across the cross toe next summer. We will continue with the remainder of the work up on Upper Sleepy Hollow. We didn't finish that project to the top of Supreme. We are most likely going to use a third-party contractor to help us with that. We have because we'll be focused on this snowmaking upgrade down here. We've been working with and watching closely with UDOT as they've come with their proposals for the EIS and such. Our position on tolling, we have some specific concerns about the tolling proposal that's in there. We're of the opinion that there's better alternatives. Reservation system has proven to be a better alternative from our perspective. Tolling doesn't, while it may increase occupancy, it doesn't reduce the number of cars that come. It could still, more cars could come than available parking in a tolling scenario. And that's one of the concerns we've had, and we're asking them to consider. We also think it's pretty darn challenging to get people out of cars. We've been trying to do that for years. And when you look at the amount of the stuff you need to go skiing, a car becomes a locker room for people. They have multiple skis and their lunch and their, clothing changes. And so while we think that's a great idea, we just see that being a tough pill to swallow for a lot of our skiing population. For employees that come in that aren't bringing that, and maybe some of our single season pass holders, it's definitely an option. And I think we could, it's a little more challenging when you go beyond that. We're concerned, as was brought up, how does it impede the flow of traffic in the canyon? Seems a little unfair that you would toll just below Alta and Snowbird and not the rest of the canyon, when the growth of traffic in the rest of the canyon has far exceeded the growth of traffic that we've seen in Alta and Snowbird. And we also would like to explore with them how, as a ski area, we have a capacity, and part of what we have with the Forest Service is we have the same parking lots that we had 20 years ago, and we have the right to sell reservations to those parking lots, and we're not under any restriction that has to be sold to someone that has 5 people in their car or 4 in a car. It can be 1. And one of my concerns is I don't want 4 people in the car because it maybe would put too many people in Alta. And so we're trying to preserve the quality of the experience. There needs to be a balance in there, and public transit is part of that balance. But, we think there's a place for vehicles still within the canyon. We have noted that peak congestion issue that was talked about by Josh. We don't see that with parking reservations. Instead of filling up by 7:30 or 8 in the morning, we don't fill till 11 or noon now. And because people come with the assurance that they have a parking spot. So we're working with them, and we're going to continue to have discussions with UDOT on our concerns in that regard. He mentioned it was traffic management and traffic demand management, and that we believe we've accomplished that on our peak periods with the reservation system. And it seems like a much cheaper and better approach to go that direction than implementing this significant tolling system that they're saying is $5 to $10 million to implement that's there. So that's kind of just a little update on that. And that's probably most of my updates, unless you have any questions.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Mike?
Just a quick comment. Mike, I read your letter to UDOT discussing the advantages and disadvantages of tolling. And I got to say, I thought your letter was right on, that it's more likely to change the demographic of the skier than change the number of skiers, that only wealthier people will be able to afford it. And when you think about it from a public access point of view, I just hate the tolling idea. And I think there's enough other low-hanging fruit, including, it's okay to toll the canyon, but we still can't talk about having the traction law in effect
right
all winter. It's the juxtaposition of those two is a little tough for me.
And I will indicate that we were able to get the traction, the way they're applying the traction law a little different, because they could do it based on forecasts. But we really need to get to the point where the law just says, if you're in the canyon between these 2 periods of time, you just have to have the right equipment on or in the vehicle. That's simple. And we're going to continue to try to explore that, probably legislatively, this next round.
Well, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I do believe that you have the support of a majority of us with respect to the traction law. Roger, would you say that's a fair thing to say?
I would, that's my sense. I also would like to recognize that the parking reservation system worked and continues to work. And so let's do something that works.
Agreed.
So Mike Morey wanted to say something.
Mike, I just wanted to publicly thank you and your entire team, for the entire winter, but especially, the last 15, 16 days, which have been really challenging. I'd like the council to know that, we've been talking together multiple times a day, and the ski area has done a lot of amazing things under the radar. We've had some food and human comfort issues that have popped up around town, and Mike has opened up his commissary and resupplied hotels. It's been his heavy equipment that's been down the canyon, pushing snow and punching holes through us, at a time where we don't have UDOT resources working the top end of the canyon. It's been his ski patrol, his office staff, his parking crew, just every employee at the lift company has just rallied behind this effort. And, that didn't come out of nowhere. So I want to thank you personally.
Well, thank you. We view this as a community, and we're all in this together, and we need to try to make it work.
Thanks, Mike.
Right. Yep.
I just wanted to echo John Burns' comments about the fact that, Mike, I've read a lot of your published comments, and I find them very balanced and sensible, and I really appreciate that. I also listened quite carefully to your comments on the tolling versus the reservation system. Like Roger, the reservation system is working much better than I expected. Have you had conversations with Snowbird about them trying to implement something like that? And do you have any feeling for whether they might be willing to support that?
Multiple conversations, multiple attempts to encourage them to make a change. I would tell you that we've had numerous calls from other ski areas. Brighton is going to reservation system for next year. Solitude is in the final stages of deciding if they're going to switch to reservations. Dave Fields has indicated they like the model they have, and they aren't too interested in changing it. It's been his feedback. And that's one of the reasons we've started to push a little harder on, the equity of the merge and trying to keep the main line open and such, because I don't know why they're taking that position rather than trying to work together to solve the issue. But it's been a little disappointing to us, and so we're going to continue to try to. And we're hoping that as others make this move, and even with the looming possibility of tolling, that it may help them to consider making a change.
Good.
May I thank you for the skiing? Thank you so much for the skiing. It's been great. I wonder if I'm missing something, because I still don't understand how express bus lanes or designating during certain times express bus lanes, like say 7 to 9, wouldn't get people out of their cars, still could be kind of controlled in terms of we'd know how many passengers were on the buses, and combined with parking reservations would actually change behavior, because if there couldn't be any cars on the road, but express buses were going up to Alta, let's say, that I think would be a strong incentive on a powder day for people to leave their cars behind and hop on public transportation. So I still don't understand why that isn't a more popular or supported idea.
And there's two parts there. One is the bus experience is a marginal experience. The public transit UTA, because people end up standing, and that's tough. The snow country coaches we've been running have been well received by people, but even those have not been as used as much as we had hoped. People will take advantage of those, but it's an experience where they know they have a reserved seat, and it's more of the experience that we would think our guests would want to have. The other challenge is we went and talked a little bit to Zion's National Park to get an understanding of how that worked in their scenario. And there's some significant differences. And one of those is that they don't have the city and two scaries at the end of the canyon. They just have trailheads along the way. And they only move a fraction of the cars that come into Zion's, because most of them can still drive through. They just can't go up that branch that's there. And they only have, I can't remember, but they have less parking for their shuttle bus services than, I think it's like 25% of the parking that Alta and Snowbird have. And they move a maximum of 2,700 people a day in their bus service. So it was kind of, it's a little different. I think express service definitely could help. I think there's a lot of people from out of town that stay now in the valley, that have rental cars, that if there was a threat of snow in the canyon, they would opt for a public transit option if it was available. So there is a segment. I think we can get there. I think it's challenging to have a period of time where you don't have any cars in the canyon. That's just tough. It's hard to deal and hard to bite, and because people come to ski and they come for powder, and it could significantly impact us from an experience standpoint if you said, oh, well, you can't come during this period of time. And by the way, the canyon's not going to open until in the middle of that period of time either. And the other concern I'd have about Josh's tolling deal is starts at 7. That just means you're going to bring a lot of people up between 5 and 6.
Right. Right. Okay, any other questions of Mike? Thanks, Mike. Great year. Just
Thank
a little
you.
much snow, but
I think we might make 900 inches by the end of the month, but I'm not
boy.
pulling for it. I'm not pulling for it.
Good. All right, let's move on to the approval of the consent agenda, the meeting minutes, and the finance reports. I move that we approve the consent agenda, the meeting minutes, the staff, and finance reports. Second for anyone?
Seconded.
Okay, discussion.
So I brought this up. I don't think we were being recorded before we had our budget meeting, but there was the question about the Class C dog tags. And when we reviewed that initially, it was my understanding, and we have a different constituency with a new mayor and different council members, but it was my understanding that we were going to try and grandfather that class out. That's the commuting class of dog tags. And that if someone's dog died or they moved from the canyon or were no longer qualified to have that tag, we just weren't going to reissue anymore. So I was surprised in the minutes to see that we're applying the same standard to that class. And I kind of wanted to take the council's temperature on that.
So is it, I don't know the answer to this. Has there been no change in the commuter dog class? Maybe.
Has there been no change?
Yeah, that is.
There has been no change, is my
There
understanding.
has been no change. So
We were talking about, at the last council meeting, we were talking about some hypothetical, I think, situations, if I'm remembering correctly, where if someone in that class forfeited their license, what would happen to that license was the conversation, I believe. And there is nothing in the ordinance that I'm aware of that says that if a dog in the Class C license passes, or if somebody moves away, for instance, any of the reasons that a license normally gets forfeited, that prohibits the council from issuing another Class C. It's been kind of the general tone of the council in conversation that, oh, we'll reallocate that to an A or a B. But that is not based on code. That's based on kind of a general feeling that I think the council has expressed and how they've decided to vote when those issues have arisen.
yeah, for instance, this year, I believe there's 1A and 1B available and no C. So what would you like to see happen, Sheridan?
Well, since we're talking about the third rail, I thought that when we had originally revisited this in light of Forest Service scrutiny, the Class C specifically, the commuter class, we were going to work to grandfather that class out. So as dogs passed, etc., that was not a class in which a holder of a tag could have another tag reissued if a dog died, because we were just, and I actually thought we had written the ordinance to include that understanding. And I guess the notes when I was looking at last meeting's minutes, and I'm sorry to not have been present. I was very ill and my mother also had a stroke, so sorry I couldn't be there, but the notes seem to imply something different, which is why I brought it up. I was also, Jen, just generally wanted to ask you about the temporary dog licenses. Are those temp licenses can be issued to anyone, Alta residents, non-Alta residents, guests, etc.?
Generally speaking, yes. You have to have a place though to house the dog. So we don't, so you either have to be staying at a residence that will allow you to have the dog. We don't give people temporary licenses to come up and go hiking with their dogs or to have their dogs stay in their car while they go skiing. You have to have a place where the dog is kind of central, and I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
And Sheridan, I remember, I mean, I guess was that 4 or 5 years ago when we had the dog discussions. I do remember that's the direction we wanted to go with the commuter, but we never actually got to changing the written ordinance. We got, I think all of us got so burnt out on those discussions that the only thing that I vaguely I remember is that if, and like Jen said, that if somebody forfeited their tag in the Class C, every time the town council has allocated, we have taken that Class C and moved it to either an A or a B. But I don't think we ever got to the point where if someone can choose to, if their dog passes and they're in the Class C, I think they still can keep that tag. But if they forfeit it, then we were allocating it. But we never got to the point where we rewrote the code. I think all of us just sort of wanted to stop talking about dogs, if I remember correctly. But yes. And that could be a discussion moving forward. but I feel like that's how the last few years have played out with the Class C anyways.
Okay.
So effectively, the Class Cs are being phased out over the long term, but it's not codified.
Correct. It depends on the wish of the council, really, and how those licenses get forwarded and when.
Right.
But they're not being phased out in the sense that we're prohibiting somebody whose dog passes. They still have the same right to get another dog within 6 months.
Correct.
I think that would be sort of the more decisive step we could take, would be to say, well, when your dog passes, we're gonna cancel the Class C license. Now they right to sort of everybody else, the A's and the B's, that you have up to 6 months to identify a new dog.
Well, shall we have a draft code ordinance for the next round that would consider that? What do you think?
I'll be honest. I'm not really. We have. I feel like we got so burned talking about dog stuff and making changes that I don't even know if I want to go there. It's a very emotional topic, and I see both sides of it, and I am not. I don't know. I feel like we have more important things to talk about right now than that. But if other council members want to go there, I mean, this is a different council, maybe.
I agree with Elise.
I don't feel strongly about taking away their right to identify another dog within 6 months, but I do support what's actually played out, which is if they don't identify a dog within 6 months and they forfeit the license, that we don't reissue another Class C. But I wouldn't be really in favor of diminishing the right of the existing Class C holders to get a new dog when their dog dies.
Okay.
Oh,
Any
although
other?
I will add one thing so first of all, Elise, I very much appreciate a hesitation to get involved, but I would also like to say that change happens, right? So there is a family that lives on the Summer Road, who lives here full time, who doesn't have a dog permit. And so my understanding is that there's a limit and they've had their dog and they bring their dog down to like a place to stay so that they're all in compliance. And so somebody who may have a Class C permit, who is not as actively involved in the community as they previously were, still holds on to that permit, when in fact we have a new member of our community who really is here all the time with their dog. And so I do think it's something that we probably need to visit at some point. I agree, I would be very devastated if I lost my dog permit, but I do see another side to the coin.
But the problem with that thought, and I agree with you, I think all of our residents should be allowed to have dogs, and that's what Harris wanted to do back in the day, but it required limiting where dogs could go. But the problem is we could easily take something away from a Class C, but we have way more residents that want dogs than we are allowed to lot. And so even if we were to get rid of some of these Class Cs, if someone's dog passes away, it doesn't guarantee that that person down the road from you is going to get that license. And so it just becomes this very emotional thing. And I'm not afraid to go talk about it again. Change does happen. It's just that I'm kind of more with John Byrne. If someone forfeits it, then I feel like when those allocations happen, we can allocate that C into A or B. But I don't feel comfortable if someone's dog passes just being like, sorry, because you can't have that anymore. I feel like they should have a right to be able to get it again. But again, change does happen. If your council wants to talk about it, we could do it.
So if I might just chime in with a personal anecdote, I'm not a council member, so my comments don't matter, but I will tell you that our dog of 17 years recently passed. My wife and I decided that, well, now that I was retiring, that we didn't need a new dog and that we would go without one. And that lasted all of 2 months. So we do have a new puppy. There was no stopping that. And I'm only really saying this is a more emotional topic. If you take away the 6-month grace period, I think it's more emotional than you might imagine.
And Elise, having been through those dog tag wars before with you in the trenches, I share your opinion in many ways about, not sure if I want to revisit that. I hear, for me, Roger, when you brought this up initially about the idea of forfeiting a tag when a dog dies, I'm strongly against that. However, I did not realize that we were including, I thought that we had decided that the Class C tags were going to be phased out completely, including when a dog passes, they will not be reissued a Class C tag. That's what prompted my question. So that's where I was coming from on this. And it's not necessarily something that we need to hash out in the future. That was just my question about last meeting's notes and what prompted me speaking with Jen about it in the first place. So I was very surprised to hear that we actually are, if a dog passes and the holder is a commuter Class C tag holder, that we are reissuing those. I was very shocked to hear that. That's where this came from.
With the possibility that this conversation about dogs could go for a very long time, I'd like to move on and to see if we can approve the consent agenda and the meeting minutes and the finance reports. Tell you what,
have a first and a second, Mayor.
Okay.
I think you know that.
Yes, I do. I move that we approve those. Oh, did I already move it? All right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Did we get a second?
Mm-hmm.
Sheridan? Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. Next topic. I think we have really had the questions regarding the departmental reports. Does anyone have any further questions for any departmental reports?
Just some of the bills that passed in the legislative session. I was troubled by some of the implications of those and what it really means. I guess specifically the public contract requirements, SB 97. I wanted to ask Polly about boycotting. Like, is that a legal definition? You know, if we find out that businesses are engaged, that we might contract with, engaged in practices that we do not support as a town, can you speak to that at all? And I'm not trying to blindside you here, but
I don't think Polly's with us any longer, but Cameron is.
okay.
Yeah, so the town is free to choose to support whatever businesses it chooses to. It just has to do that fairly. So there are many government agencies and states that have made those political statements in their contracts. And so it is something the town could do if it chose to. I'm not familiar with the state bill that you're referencing. I'd have to look at it to be more familiar, but the town can do that, municipalities can do that, counties and the states can do that.
I mean, it basically prevents the town of Alta, as I understand it, based on our representative, you know, kind of giving a gloss of everything that passed. We couldn't say that we only want to use, let's say, clean energy. We couldn't say that we want to be in support of women's reproductive rights. Like, there are a lot of things named in that bill that I find really egregious, that basically the legislature says, if I understand her gloss correctly, we cannot do as a town.
Yeah, and again, I'd have to read it. I will say that generally, as a practical matter, I think the legislature heavily favors local control as long as the local control ends at the state level. I would hazard a guess that is more of that same philosophy. But I've made a note to look at that, and I'm happy to send an explanation and a summary to council on what the ramifications are on that.
It's interesting on 97. I was hoping she was going to appear today because I'm not even sure what that sentence means. Refuses to commit to meet an environmental standard or facilitate access to abortion. So
Right.
if it's almost like it's a double negative there. Somebody's gonna have to explain to me, is that saying you can't do business with entities that facilitate or support women's reproductive rights, or you can't not do business with, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not really English.
And the term boycott, like, that seems, is that a legal definition of what we can and can't do?
I mean, it would be. So the town the town is a legal entity, and the town can take a position on political topics. And so the town could take a position, hey, we disagree with whatever this issue is, and we encourage everyone to act in support or opposing this entity. And as a town, we are going to boycott or whatever. The town could do that for sure. I apologize. I'm just not familiar. That statute didn't hit my radar during the legislative session.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to blindside you. I just was a little startled to hear the legislature dictate exactly what we could and can do, especially when I looked at the list of what they were basically advocating.
So Cameron, could you put together a staff report for next time that clarifies this item?
Yeah, and I'm happy to get it out as soon as possible and not necessarily have to wait till the next meeting, but we can put it in the next materials for the next meeting for sure, but I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
Okay, great.
The question is, should we be asking that question? I'm all for Cameron doing the work, but should we be asking Shelley from Parson Bailey, who does this work and wrote the memo, for a little more explanation?
Yeah, that was going to be my first call, honestly, because she was the one that tracked a lot of this, and so she probably could answer your question off the cuff.
And it would be helpful because I had other questions about the bills that passed. Although I appreciated her gloss, I wanted a little more detail. So maybe that's the way to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Is that the end of the comments, questions on the staff reports and so forth?
So
Did we approve the staff reports? I'm not quite sure we did.
I'm not sure we voted.
We don't need to, it's just the consent agenda and you've finished that.
Okay, good. Well, let's move on to the mayor's report. Of which I had a lot to say early on. But I want to point out that we're holding daily operations meetings on to stay abreast of the current avalanche situation. And in fact, they're going to start in just over an hour from now. And I think we may continue that as we see the future possibilities, for instance, flooding. We're still trying to address the bus schedule situation for next season. You know, it was devastating that UTA reduced our bus service by 70% this year. I'm not as optimistic as Josh was on that being restored, but we'll continue to work on it. I want to remind all present and not present that registration for one of the two expiring council seats is in early June. And Molly or Jen can fill in for details. I believe that there's a 1 week period and you have to sign up in person, right?
Yeah, I
Jen?
just actually spent some time updating the town's website today with some information related to this. And I think Chris is going to send out a newsletter soon with some links. But the declaration for candidacy has to be filled out in person at the town office between June 1st and June 7th.
Got it. Okay. There's an annual canyon cleanup, which is tentatively scheduled for June 29th. And I would hope that all available residents and employees in this canyon participate. It's you got a breakfast and lunch and a cool t-shirt. So designed, I guess, by Chris. The town manager ordinances we dealt with, we're in the process of interviewing some candidates for that position, and we'll go to the ordinance in a moment. And I think that in the interest of time, I think I'll end my mayor's report there, and let's turn to the next item on the agenda. It has to do with a couple of ordinances having to do with first is discussion and possible resolution of reappointing 3 members of the planning commission, John Nebstead, Jeff Niemeyer, and Rob Voy, for 3 years, 5 years, and 2 years respectively. And the reason that they're at different times is so that we can stagger the expiration of their terms. I think that everybody has had an opportunity to take a look at these people. Their bios were on the website. So I move that we adopt resolution 2023-R6, reappointing those planning commission members to the terms I have stated. Second by Elise. Any discussion? Okay, without discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Adopted.
Did Mike Maury have a quick comment there?
I think Mike has a comment or question.
Yeah, not relevant to the current discussion, Mayor. I need to ask permission to be excused from the meeting so I can go to our operations briefing with over at the lift company.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You're. Um,
Okay, thank you for
Okay.
thank you for approving the planning commission reappointments. I'll let everybody know that they were all willing to serve, continue to serve. I'll let them know. And just so you know, we're still trying to represent disciplines as we can, as well as people from the community. John Nipstead is the planner, Jeff Niermeyer is the environmentalist, and Rob Voy, who started at the Rustler and started the Albion Day Lodge when it first was built. He's our business representative. But I'll let them know, and thanks again. We have a great commission.
Good. So let's discuss the possible action of ordinance 2023-0-2 creating position of town manager. I trust everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at that. John has spent a lot of time working with, I think, Cameron on it. I'm not going to read the ordinance, but I trust others have. So let's open this for discussion. Oh, well, I guess I should move to adopt this ordinance.
Seconded.
Seconded, okay. Discussion. I think we've actually had substantial discussion of this in previous meetings, so I'm not, if there's any further discussion, let's have it now.
I'll just comment that I think this is a big step in the right direction. And Cameron and I have, Cameron has done all the writing, and you really worked hard to get it just exactly right. Roger and I have been through it innumerable times, I would say at this point, Roger.
Yes, I would say innumerable.
And it's important to, realize not only is it about empowering the town manager to do his job and running the business of the town day to day, it's still subject to the direction provided by the legislative body, and communicated and oversight, provided by the mayor and the rest of us by ordinance and resolution. It's about right sizing the mayor's job. And I feel really good about this. And I hope that we pass this ordinance.
Any other comments? Carolyn, Elise? Sheridan? No. Okay, well, it has been moved and seconded that we adopt this ordinance.
It's really two ordinances, I guess, Roger. It's 02 and
yeah, but
03.
I think we have to do them one at a time. So let's do ordinance 2023-0-2, creating the position of the town manager. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's passed. Now, discussion of possible action on ordinance 2023-03, delegating administrative provisions from essentially from the mayor to this town manager, which is the short form is that we need somebody full time, and this is the solution we currently have. So I move that we adopt ordinance 2023-0-3, delegating administrative positions. And is there a second to that?
Second.
John, okay, discussion. Sheridan, you look like you opened your mouth, but we didn't hear anything.
Sorry, just talking to myself, Mayor. I just was saying I'm for it.
All right, you're for it. Okay. So in that case, let's have a vote. All in favor of adopting this ordinance, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ordinance is passed. Okay.
Mayor, Can I interrupt?
yes.
I just want to make sure that I'm recording the votes correctly. And I didn't on either one of those actually hear Carolyn's voice, and her video was off. So Carolyn, did you vote in favor of both of those?
I did. I'm just
Okay,
not
thank
fast
you.
enough on my mute button. I apologize.
I thought you did. I just wanted to double check. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, John.
All right, let's turn now. Gee, we're only 5 minutes behind. The wage study presentation by Craig.
Okay, I'm off mute, so hopefully you can hear me. Given our robust discussion of this topic in the budget committee, I'm going to try to do a very short summary of that discussion, and hopefully we can move through this and save some time. So hang on 1 second while I share my screen. So you'll all remember that we had a significant presentation for Mike Swallow in December. Mike Swallow runs an independent firm. That firm provides a benchmarking service that is specifically tailored to municipalities. He went through what I would consider a very significant and robust methodology for the town council in December. And the preliminary work that was presented at that time showed that we were out of line with our top positions by quite a bit of money. And so following that presentation, work continued primarily with Jen, Roger, myself, and Mike. And that continued. Okay, how do I get the next one? That continued in February and March. A line-by-line review was done on the data that was received, and that resulted in a recommendation for salary adjustments of a total of $174,750. And as expected, the bulk of the change is only in the top 4 positions. So here's a summary of the changes that were recommended for the top 4 positions. What you have is the current salary over here on the left. What you have over here is the benchmarking survey data from Mike. In the case of the new town manager position, the recommendation for the budget holding is basically at the midpoint. For the other positions, it's less than the midpoint, giving some room for growth over the next several years. I think that while this is a significant increase, I think it's actually a fair and reasonable increase. And I will say that a tremendous amount of work has gone into this. I think Sheridan correctly identified that much of the data in Mike's database was for towns that were considerably larger than Alta, and that is correct. But as we discussed, we're not recruiting for job applicants only in the Alta region alone. And in fact, when I asked Roger about the town manager position, he said that currently none of the candidates are actually living in the Alta region. So we're going to be sourcing from the Salt Lake, from the greater Salt Lake area. And consequently, even though we're a smaller town than some of the other places that we benchmarked against, I think that's the competitive job market that we have to consider. I also noted that $174,750 was for the totality of our current existing staff. Roger, in a previous meeting, briefed the town council on his hope that John Gildner will continue as a contractor for the town of Alta for some period of time. That contract has not yet been finalized, or from all I know, maybe perhaps not even discussed. I do hope we can get that. I think having a smooth transition, well, let me rephrase that. There is no way that we are going to replace John Gildner's knowledge overnight. That is impossible. But I do think spending some money on a transition contract makes eminently good sense and will be money well spent. That is not included in the $174,750 recommendation that I just made, but would be an additional contract that we would apprise the town council on when that contract is agreed. I then went into a fair bit of analysis of our of sort of our fiscal situation. And I think that, the short summary is that for each of the last 6 years, we have generated excess cash over what we spent, slightly less than $500,000 per year. We identified, though, that in addition to some of these salary increases, we're likely going to be having increased spending on the capital budget side. So that's where I think some of this money is going to go. But I do think that we've got room in our budget without stretching too much to accommodate this kind of salary increases. As I said, we did have a very long, robust discussion at the budget committee meeting. Are there any questions, or did I omit something in my summary of that meeting that somebody else wants to make sure that we emphasize? Okay, then Roger, I think, based upon, that discussion, I think it's time that we actually have a move to approve that just under $175,000 increase for the salaries, with the knowledge that we are likely or hopefully going to come back with another contract for John Gilner for transition services.
Just to be clear, we're approving it as the number to use in the budget. Is that what
correct.
We're doing here?
Better phrase, John. Thank you.
Jen, is that how you see it?
I have a little concern with that, and that being that I don't think the number is going to change much. But Roger has not had the opportunity to sit down with the individual department heads and speak with them about their individual staff members. And so I would like to let that opportunity happen, which I think should happen before the next town council meeting. But I guess I'd like to let that process unfold as well. And we didn't have the time to get that done before this meeting.
I'd also say that generally speaking, we don't approve elements of the budget as we go along. We approve the budget in its entirety when we get to that point. So I think we can express support for this work. And actually, I think, great job, Craig. You've done you've taken the bull by the horns, and this represents a tremendous amount of work. And I think you've done a thoughtful job. But I think we should stick with tradition and not approve individual elements as we go along. Would you agree with that, John?
That makes perfectly good sense, John. So I think really the question is, does anybody have serious objections to the type of recommendations that we're making?
I not only don't have a serious objection to it, I think that it's a job well done and thoughtful, and I feel good about it, and I endorse the numbers that you're suggesting here. So said positively, I could be positive about these numbers.
Roger,
Same.
you're on mute.
Is that you, Sheridan?
I just was saying same. Thank you, John. Yeah, I support where you're going with this, Craig. Thank you.
Roger, you're muted.
Carolyn or Elise, did you want to weigh in at all on this topic? Okay.
I'm good. I heard about it in the budget committee meeting.
Yeah. And Carolyn?
I feel good about it as well. I think those changes, it's appropriate to pause, but I also appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and there are changes that have been needed for a long time. So I appreciate all that. work that's gone into it.
Well
Yeah.
said.
Well said is right. Okay, next topic is future of ACVB, which Chris is going to speak to.
Thank you, Mayor. So we didn't manage to get it included in the agenda that Brandon Ott was going to join us as ACVB president. And I was sort of, but he is planning to really to give the presentation. And I was sort of, I told him we were, 25 minutes behind schedule 10 minutes ago, and now we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule. So,
but Brandon Ott is here.
He's now in the call. So, I'd love to just go ahead and turn it over to Brandon. And Brandon, if you want to call on me to speak to, the last slide or anything else, or help answer questions, I'm certainly happy to do so.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone from way down in the valley here.
Since you can't get up here, it's understandable.
Okay. Okay. Can everyone see this first screen here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. So nice to see some friendly faces on the call today. So as the president of the Alta Chamber and Visitors Bureau, sort of my role today is to share with you some of the conversations that, the board has been having as of late. And really what we've done is we've really taken a hard look at the chamber, the roles of the chamber and the value that the chamber brings to the community. And really the ultimate goal of our time today is to air out the idea of, it's challenging kind of to say it out loud, but to air out the idea of disillusion in regards to the Alta Chamber, and to get that out, for public consumption and ongoing and further discussion. So those are the goals of our presentation today. Let's see. Are you guys seeing my notes or the full, there we go. Okay. So I'll run through kind of a recent history. It's always good to look back at accomplishments, challenges, before we can take steps moving forward, of course. So look a little bit about what's working, what's not working, and ongoing exploration around disillusion or dormancy. So in recent history, we've developed new strategic approaches following pandemic budget cuts. We've talked a lot about this. We dissolved the coordinator position in an effort to be more nimble, to have our limited budgets work more effectively and more pointed for the benefits of the Alta community and growth and support the community where needed. We kind of pivoted from more of a traditional destination marketing organization. When the organization was founded in 2011, that was at a time when, we were really still, the Alta community was really still working towards bringing and attracting visitors during the shoulder seasons, early ski season, late season, as well as summertime. And, we've continued to see those areas fill in with continued visitation. So as that has happened, we've moved more towards this second bullet point, a premise of enhancing the Alta experience for locals and visitors, including new programming in support for ACE, and public arts, placemaking program, and really ramping up a partnership with ACE to help facilitate some of those programs. Since we dissolved the coordinator position to make our money kind of go a little further, it's been a board operated organization since 2020. We do continue to focus on destination marketing. That's been a lot lighter, community guided visitor information, member services, and again, public art and placemaking, as I mentioned there earlier. So what works? You guys, the coolest thing, hands down, have been our kind of, biannual gatherings of the entire community, and, both in the fall and the spring, a little bit of a winter preview, and then a little bit of a look back on winter. And, for me personally, it's just so cool to see so many different facets, of the community together in one place, business owners, town residents, so on and so forth. And I think that's so vital, to, such a unique, world-class destination such as Alta. We need that constant communication in such a unique environment. So that's been awesome. And then also we've been very involved, of course, in facilitating conversations with the Alta Resort Shuttle, with Tom Schneider, with Adrian and Dan, and have worked hard to have a seat at that table to make sure that the shuttle is, continues to be an important vehicle in the town of Alta. And then, of course, working with some of the other destination marketing organizations, the other DMOs, Visit Salt Lake, to help secure night shuttle contributions. Also, reached out and with the Utah Office of Tourism, we were a little miffed, with an unsuccessful grant this past time around, but nonetheless, we did give it a go. And of course, facilitating contributions by local partners in our community. And then also, we do have a budget. Let's speak more to that, but we have a fair amount of some money in the bank. And so we've been able to, use some of those funds to close some of the funding gaps for the shuttle. So, and then, the growth in this relationship with ACE, ACE is such a, important part of our community, and the mental health support with local residents, with employees, and then just kind of that deeper experience enhanced programming that they provide for visitors coming up the canyon. So that's been of course a really cool thing. And that's been able to give provide some more funding to ACE. So, some of the challenges here, these are many of which have been persistent. So for a long time, I've only been back in this role at Little Cottonwood Canyon for 5 years here, but, I know that we've had, persistent challenges with board and membership recruitment. And, we're not losing a lot of members per se, but really involvement with the board has weighed heavily on the small board team and the working board. And it really is something that has kind of brought this conversation to a head almost as much as anything, and so many members of the community have had such a vital role in the chamber in the past, where they've taken a turn, so to speak. Paul Hubers and the Adrian Rudimans, and just to mention a few. And then, and this has been exacerbated, of course, when we decided to dissolve the coordinator position as more of that workload on the board. So then also our budget, we were hopeful in dissolving the coordinator position that we would have more funds available for programming. Well, it turns out we still have challenges always spending that money. And so routinely underspending the budget. We see a low return on investment for some of the destination marketing initiatives that are out there. One example with respect to time well spent is 1,000 page views back to, that time well spent landing page on the ACE website. And Sarah was thrilled with that. And she's like, that's awesome for us. But I was like, well, Sarah, that's still only 1,000 page views. So it's still, all relative, but, so little return on investment there. And then, again, just the time that's spent on some of these application the application grants and are very time consuming when it comes to a working board. So, really all of this leads us to the question of, is ACVB a good use of public funds and member contributions? Chris will speak to this a little bit more, but of course, the town of Alta has, for a long time had a sizable line item on your books, giving back to and helping to keep the Alta Chamber vibrant and fiduciarily, relevant from year to year. So this big question, dissolution or dormancy. We've discussed both pathways many times with our entire board of directors. One of the challenges with dormancy, and that would require continued board activity, some overhead expenses. And the question of, will the ACVB ever have enough resources to retain an employee if that were the way to go? We do currently maintain, an $84,000 checking account balance. Bylaws require assets to be transferred to another 501c6 if dissolution is the pathway here. We have not collected any dues this fiscal year 2023, by design, for reasons I think that are pretty obvious at this point. So in this whole process, I think one of the last things that I do want to say is that when the board has, when we've had these hard discussions as of late, we want to make sure that if this is a direction that we move towards, and it is dissolution is the direction we're recommending, that some of the successful elements live on. And some of those elements, would continue to be the community gatherings and ACE support. I've spoken wearing my Alta ski area hat, spoken with my boss, directly at Alta ski area, Mike, and we're committed, the ski area is committed to continue to, to make sure that these, help financially support and make sure that these biannual meetings take place. Also, making sure that the whole community has a voice at those meetings, and it's not just a, just an Alta ski area thing. It's a community gathering where ideas can be exchanged and rapport can continue to be developed between one another. Dissolution would require written consent of 2/3 of active ACVB board members. We have a membership event coming up this upcoming Tuesday. It's at Snow Pine again. It would be from 4:30 to 6. And that would be a great forum to continue to discuss this idea, more so with the membership, address concerns, hear ideas, and take it a step at a time. So it really has boiled down to just a function of a working board and, just questioning the value that the chamber brings with those hours spent from that working board, and the question too is, are there efficiencies that can be gained where, Chris, as an example in particular, he has his hands in 2 organizations. He has his, Town of Alta is his day job, of course, and then he's been very involved in the Alta Chamber for a long time. He's kind of been a rock of the Alta Chamber, and when he has to have his hands in his, in both organizations, it slows down workflow. It takes away efficiencies of what he's able to achieve in respect. Sorry guys, I'm just working at home. Hey, I'm on a call. Okay. In respect to, solutions around the Alta Resort Shuttle, for example. Chris, anything that you can add here on the bylaws require assets to be transferred to another 501c6, but ...
Yeah, but ... we are hoping that we can find a way around that. That provision in the bylaws reads to me like it was intended to ensure that a 501c6 is a business league in the tax code. So you're, tax exempt for providing, I don't know, the services of a business league. It's not profit oriented, but it is, more profit oriented than something that's purely nonprofit. So to me, that provision is, again, seemed designed to ensure the continuity of some kind of destination marketing organization, business league, ACVB-like organization in Alta. But the ACVB is not the first go around of a destination marketing organization or business league in Alta. And so I don't know that anybody has the appetite right now to, give it a fourth try. So anyways, yeah, we are hoping that there is, if we proceed with dissolution, there's some way around, having to pass these funds along. It may be as simple as for the board to amend the bylaws. And I will offer that, a few things we've discussed doing with this money include, making a one-time contribution to the shuttle program or a series of one-time contributions to the shuttle program over a couple of years in order to, kind of transition the program into some other more sustainable model, and also contributing funds to ACE.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Let's see, do we have any more slides here? Is that the last one?
I think there should be one more slide there. I think there's another slide up. Yeah, there you go.
Oh boy. Okay, you wanna jump into this one, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So thanks, Brandon, for talking through the meat of the presentation. I asked to have this on the agenda today because ACVB is a town program. It appears in the budget as the town's economic development department. It was originally enabled by a sales tax increase. I don't know if it was in 2005. It was sometime in, let's say, the aughts, but the town increased sales taxes sort of on a handshake agreement to fund, sort of invest in the business community and fund something like the chamber. The chamber was not originally the Alta Chamber Visitors Bureau. It was the Alta Resort Association, and that might not have even been the first iteration. There might be people on the call who would recall that better. The town was giving as much as $84,000 plus up to, I believe, an additional $10,000 for matching contribution to a grant. When the pandemic hit, the chamber has, as long as I've been around, always been the town's largest kind of discretionary expense. So when we were looking to cut budgets by, I believe 25% is what we cut out of the budget for fiscal year 2021, the chamber was the obvious place to do that. So we reduced the contribution by half. The chamber went through a sort of a reorganization of sorts, and we determined we didn't need $42,000, so it was reduced again for fiscal year 23 down to $31,500, and that's what's in the budget for this year. But again, we haven't billed the town for that. We haven't made enough progress through our budget for that to feel necessary. I have served as the town's representative on the board for the going on 9 years that I've been in my position at the town. The town has a fixed role on the board, whereas the town and the ski area both have fixed roles, and then other organizations that participate are sort of subject to this rolling eligibility standard. I feel the decision to dissolve ACBB is a kind of a policy question that's above my pay grade. ACBB I think was originally envisioned as something that would provide a function for the town, a benefit for the municipality. And I know that's how destination marketing organizations or economic development organizations are, intended to operate in most communities. So that's why I asked for this item to be on the agenda today. And after I make this final comment about ACBB operating the shuttle, I'd just like to open it up for any town council input. I do want to address this question of whether ACBB could operate the resort shuttle program. I did have a little bit of email back and forth with John Byrne earlier today. The chamber certainly could take on the role of, essentially raising funds to pay for the shuttle, and then managing a contract with a transportation company like Alta Shuttle. A couple downsides to that are that it would require additional overhead. If the chamber were only to run the shuttle, it would be more expensive because in order to operate the nonprofit, we would have overhead expenses, things like accounting, filing tax returns. We have traditionally done a kind of financial statement annually, some other board of directors expenses, and it would still, I think, most likely entail a lot of work for the town, since again, the town has been alongside the ski area the most stable participant in the chamber over the years. So from my perspective, it might be a similar amount of work for the town to run the shuttle program as it would be for the chamber, and it would kind of reduce some of that overhead, and I think just be a more efficient model overall. So with that, I wanted to have this opportunity to hear any comments, questions, or concerns from the council about this notion of dissolving ACBB, or at least making it go dormant for a couple of years, since we're getting pretty close, to the end of our budget season, and ACBB has to, make some decisions about next fiscal year on its own.
Comment. And that is, it's a rare entity that comes to a government organization, says, I don't think you really need to spend money on us anymore. So that takes a lot of guts. The other thing is that we have to collectively figure out how to keep this resort shuttle going, because that is really a terrific asset for the town. And over the next, fortunately, we have a few months to do that. But I admire you taking this on and saying, sometimes things are ready to phase out.
Well, thanks, Roger. And I would add that in these ongoing discussions internally, I mentioned it briefly, but in discussions with other community members around this as well, we're not, if this were to happen, we're not just walking away from some of these commitments and some of these ideas to continue to gather the community. We're not walking away from support of ACE and these kind of things. We're not walking away from responsible recreation messaging. It's just, we just don't have the people in place to do the level of work without a coordinator. And, so that's where we're at.
Yeah, got it. Other comments? Thoughts, questions?
I think
John.
I think you've identified, hey, Brandon, I think that, I think you're right. The community events have been terrific. I've been to a couple of them. I really enjoyed them. I think they were pretty unique events. But those in your support of ACE and working with ACE, those were the two things that I think touched most of us at Alta, or more of us in Alta. And I think at least some of us think that the sort of destination marketing aspect, while I embrace the idea of a chamber of commerce, it's a little bit in the gray area for the town to be spending money marketing effectively private enterprise. And so those, that you've de-emphasized it here, I think that's appropriate. I think the organization has, been a positive thing for Alta. And I guess my feeling as a councilman is I'm kind of inclined to support whatever the board of the ACVB decides to do. I don't think, and I'll probably just leave it at that. That, whatever you guys decide to do will be okay by me at least, and hopefully by the rest of us. And I think you identified the strengths of the organization and the things that were really impactful. And but like you say, 1,000 hits on the website isn't really much of a return on equity. And hopefully the couple of things that did resonate well with the community, including your biannual events, hopefully that'll continue. So
Thanks, John.
Thank you for those comments.
Thank you for the presentation. I could wish that Connie Marshall were able to chime in. I'd love to pick her brain a little bit more sometimes about her vision of what ACVB could be and should be. Karen Travis also, I think, was always a great supporter of and defender of these funds that came into the town being used for ACVB. So is there any hope that they might be at this next gathering?
Sheridan, Connie will certainly be there. Adrian or Dan will be there. They've been longtime proponents of the chamber. I spoke with Adrian at length this morning. And she said, Brandon, in reading that email yesterday, I was really sad, but I get it. And, that's where she's at. So, I was afraid a little bit to, kick off this idea in a board meeting with Connie at the table, admittedly, very, very afraid. And, she is supportive of the direction as well, because we ultimately think it will lead to better efficiencies within the town, and the use of people's time within the town.
And, I'll just add that, I've always really enjoyed the ACVB board. I mean, or ACVB in the board service. I mean, as much as it can be a little bit of a pain, I love the collaboration. It's always been an awesome, dedicated team of representatives from our fantastic business community. And I've always believed in the mission, and I don't necessarily feel like Alta needs a ton of additional promotion, especially not given what ACV has been able to afford. But just philosophically, the idea of the town investing back in itself and its, sort of productive capacity. I mean, lots of local governments do it, county governments at least. And I've always had sort of faith in this consortium of business opportunities. But again, I think we've been sort of beating our heads against the small budget and the lack of bandwidth that we have as individuals coming together to operate it. And I think it is probably time to turn the page on it and see what else we can do with the funds. So.
Any other thoughts, comments from anyone else we haven't heard from? I'm like John Byrne. I feel like I will support anything that the board desires to do.
I feel like you guys are in it and you know ACVB better than anybody, and you have spent a lot of time on this. And I think that it's not something you're doing lightly. So I feel like you've put all the thought into both pass and the fact that you even have to think about this. And I feel like I trust whatever path you guys feel will be best for the community. So I support whatever you guys would need to do.
Great. Thanks, Elise. Well, if the road opens and can stay open, I would encourage further discussion next Tuesday at Snow Pine. So we'll be over there in Sven's again from 4:30 to 6. So be great to see some of you in person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today, Brandon, and all of your efforts, both Chris and Brandon. We really appreciate it, and appreciate all the time and energy you've put into the organization.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I second all that. Okay, next to last item on our agenda is new business. Anybody have any new business? I actually do. Excuse me. I want to talk about something called functional redundancy, which is the ability to substitute one item to fill in for the absence of another, and it's saved some of us from even more serious problems. When we lost power, our spark ignited gas stove is lightable by a match, and so it's really nice to have a secondary way of getting water. I mean, there's plenty of snow outside, that's for sure. Some of us are constantly annoyed by robocalls from people we don't want to talk to trying to sell us things we don't want to buy. And yet a landline serves as a redundant communication link when cell service goes down, and that's important. So there's usually these sorts of items are not really needed or even noticed, but we're kind of living on the edge of civilization here, and it's good to keep them in mind. All right, with that, I would.
Can we stop for a moment and
Sure.
applaud your effort, Roger? I know how involved you've been throughout this snow emergency, and I just want to express my thanks for the countless hours you've put into it and the responsibility that you've taken.
Thank you. Thank you. Which Carolyn has her thumb up. Which it reminds me that in 15 minutes we have another snow emergency meeting. So we're going to adjourn. Well, let's see. I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second.
Sorry.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks for coming. See you next month.
Great meeting.
Great job, everybody.
Be well.